燃え上がれガンダム。
Welcome to Weekly Suit Gundam, the special bonus podcast brought to you by the folks at the Weekly Stuff Podcast. I am Sean Chapman.
And I'm Jonathan Lack.
And we are here once again to dive into the wild and wacky world of Gundam. This week on the show, we are continuing our 3rd anniversary extravaganza by talking a hell of a lot, Jonathan, about some Gundam music.
Are we going to do this whole podcast in song?
Yes, this is the musical episode of the podcast. We have, written an entire musical score. We actually had Thomas, your brother, provide backing on it. I do the acoustic guitar. I'm very excited. We spent 5 years planning it, actually. Longer than we've been doing Weekly Suit Gundam. It's all been building up to this moment.
Gundam music, yeah, gonna talk about the best songs and soundtracks.
Okay, let's stop that joke, and let's move on to actually talking about what we're going to talk about here today, Jonathan, because I believe on the last podcast, we had a slightly different idea of what this podcast was going to be, because I think we were going to do a bigger version of this podcast that covered more topics, and then we both started working on our Gundam songs list, and we're like, there's no way that we're going to do all of this and like mobile suits and shit here too. It's like, that's not going to happen. So this week's episode is just going to be dedicated purely to the music of the Gundam franchise. We have ranked the top 10 soundtracks. So that's like the instrumental music and everything that goes into shows for considering every single Gundam thing we have watched. We did a top 5 list after the first year of the podcast, but we didn't revisit it for the second year, but now we're doing a full top 10. And then we have also made a top 10 list of musical or of full songs, like openings, endings, insert songs for the season 3 shows we have watched. So everything covered in season 3, we have a unique list for that. But the main feature of today is we have each made a list that was originally going to be 30 songs, has ballooned into 40 songs, that we each have a top 40 of our favorite Gundam songs, openings, endings, and insert songs that cover every single thing we have covered on all of Weekly Suit Gundam, and it is the most hellish fucking thing I have ever had to do for a podcast.
Yes. One fun thing is I have made YouTube playlists on our channel of our top 40 Gundam songs. You can see Jonathan's list, you can see Sean's list. I'm arranging those just in chronological order, so it would start with Fly Gundam on through stuff from Hathaway, but you will hear them ranked from 40 to 1 here, which is just because we like to torture ourselves is how we did it. But if you want to listen to a top 40 Gundam radio station DJ'd by us, there you go. Those are on our YouTube channel now.
Yeah, and really we could have gone for a top 60, 70, 80 plus, I mean, really well and truly, it is the most brutal fucking thing. Because particularly once it ballooned out to about 40, I realized that once you get about to that 40 mark, there's maybe 30 songs I think are all about as good as this number 40 position. And it's I think I described to you to text that it felt like I was murdering children. As I was saying, no, you song don't make it onto this list, nor do you. This song I have listened to 200 fucking times and loved to death, and I can sing from heart, and I can play some of the guitar parts of it, but unfortunately you don't get to make the list either, because there are that many good Gundam songs.
Well, murdering children, but Gundam is a franchise where children are murdered quite a bit. So I think it fits. I think it's a fitting activity. And in this case, no actual children were murdered.
As far as you know.
Oh, God. Okay. Well, Sean, do you want to go ahead and start with the top 10 soundtracks? Because this was hard, but it wasn't hard on the level of the songs.
No, yeah. I had a pretty clear picture Because one, I mean, there are far fewer total soundtracks to consider, and there are lots
Yes.
of soundtracks like, I will say, the soundtrack to G Savior, for instance, I never really considered it. I didn't bother to see, has anyone uploaded a track from G Savior onto YouTube? I don't think so. So there's a lot that was very easy to sort of say, this is not even part of the list. There are a couple of shows that I'm sad didn't make the list, because there are definitely more than 10 great soundtracks in Gundam. I also definitely sort of conflated very similar soundtracks for sequel shows and stuff like that, and I just said, this is all kind of like a big soundtrack in a way, even if I have like my favorite is the one I kind of credit most prominently, so that also kind of narrowed it down for me.
Yeah, the way I did that, Sean, is that I made a rule of one per composer. So
Yes, I did the same thing.
Yeah, so Hiroyuki Sawano, Shigeki Saigasa, some of the other composers have done multiple Gundams, so I just did one for those. Unicorn, Narrative Gundam, and Hathaway's Flash are all Sawano. I picked one of those, but, keep in mind I love all the Sawano music. Same with Shigeki Saigasa. Anyone who's done Gundam multiple times has done it for a reason. My top three were really clear. What order they were in was really hard. Everything else was fairly easy to rank for me, but those top three, man, I finally had to just, Marie Kondo it and hold each soundtrack close to my heart and just feel and try to gauge which one sparks the most joy and then rank them in that order. Those top three to me are a fucking pillar. They're like the Gundam musical Mount Rushmore, and then the ones right after it really close. And overall, these are all soundtracks I could listen to all day, every day, because Gundam's got great music.
Yeah, for me, I think some of that probably was easier for me because when we did the top 5 last time, that was basically my top 5 because I had already seen everything at that point,
yeah.
so I already knew, and I had already lived with those soundtracks for years at that point. But there is a slight modification in my top 5, but it is still basically my top 5. And then I was just very happy to then be able to then talk about the other soundtracks I also really like. But if we had done with again one slight modification, if we just redid that topic from last time, it would basically be the same list, because that's what my list was kind of anyways before we did that podcast. Rewatching all the shows only reaffirmed by very strong love for the specific soundtracks that are in my top 5. But all of them are great. I'm very happy that we have a spot to kind of talk about all of these, and maybe even get to mention a couple of honorable mentions that didn't quite make the list, because again, there are lots of great soundtracks in Gundam.
Yep. Well, why don't I go ahead and kick us off, Sean, with my number 10, which I had a bunch competing for the number 10 spot, and I thought about it, and the one I landed on is the score for Mobile Suit Gundam The Origin by Takayuki Hattori, which is such a special score it's like interpolations of original Gundam 79 music. It's music that is sort of in the style of more 70s style anime music, and then it's original, material, which there are a couple of tracks that I have listened to so many times. Anything relating to Char's main theme, that is sort of the big main theme of The Origin, is just one of my favorite pieces of Gundam music. I think giving Char a big, musical motif that is sort of heroic but also dark and sad is such a brilliant move of The Origin, and one of my favorite things about that whole OVA. The piece that plays over the end of episode 6 when you have sort of the whole crew coming together and you see all of their names on screen. It's called Future Heroes. That's one of my favorite tracks. It's just a really, great score that I think before I made this list, I realized I'd maybe taken for granted a little bit, because it's not as moment-to-moment brilliant as some Gundam scores, but in its key moments, it is some of the best Gundam music you can find, and I'm glad I put it on my top 10.
Yeah, I'll say that for my number 10 slot, I had 3 different shows that were things that were vying for that spot, and The Origin was one of them, but didn't quite make the cut. And part of that, this happens sometimes on the list where it makes it a little bit easier. I would have probably done what I did with number 10 anyways, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be somewhere on Jonathan's list. I think it'll find its way on there. So we'll have an opportunity to talk about it anyways, because yeah, it's a great soundtrack. As you say, all of the sort of the main themes and leitmotifs for that core Char theme are incredible. It has some redone versions of some of the classic Mobile Suit Gundam songs as well that I like a lot. I think it's for me, I think what kept it out of my top 10 is it maybe leans slightly too much on the Char theme, and that's maybe the only thing that keeps it there. Is I wish there was a little bit more variety I think is like the one thing that kept it from being my number 10 slot. But it's, again, it was very close to being on my list. My number 10 is the soundtrack to Mobile Suit Gundam 00, which is by Kenji Kawai, the great Kenji Kawai. So again, this was vying with Origin, and I'll say one of the other ones is Victory Gundam by Akira Senju was the other one that was like very close to being my number 10. All these were like kind of fighting for that spot. And I think what ultimately got like 00 Gundam won out on is I think it's got a great variety to it. While having a very consistent sonic space, which I think is the thing that Kenji Kawai is very good at. He's very good at creating a consistency in terms of the world that the music inhabits, but finding a lot of space to explore within that world. And it's something where he's just an incredibly like skilled and like storied composer who has worked on dozens and dozens of shows, movies, games. And it's something I'm always super impressed by. It's something that's also very true of his Ghost in the Shell score, which is probably my favorite thing he's done. But there's a like heaviness and a fucking weight to the score of 00 that is like oppressive and very appropriately so, right? I think it really communicates that feel of the series that you are looking from the perspective of what in any other Gundam show would be the villain side, right? The bad guys would normally be what Celestial Being is. And so it really fills out that space with this sense of weight and heaviness with really big, heavy drums that he uses all the time that just sort of underscore the entire soundtrack. There's a lot of really great use of like electric guitars in the back, particularly in a lot of the fight songs. My favorite track is Trans Am Riser. That is one of the big action themes from the second half of the show that kicks so much ass and has a lot of really great guitar stuff in it. But my favorite stuff in the soundtrack in terms of like its thematic work and like the leitmotifs is there's a core theme that's the Setsuna theme that he works into a lot of different songs in different ways that is fucking amazing. It's got a sort of Arabic quality to it. It uses some traditional Arabic instrumentation for it, which is appropriate obviously with Setsuna's background and where he comes from in the world. And he also like mixes that in with like Marina Ismail, the princess from that region, also has similar instrumentation and similar thematic work done in her stuff. And the interplay between his theme and Marina's theme and that whole style, and this very kind of somber, sad quality, and there's almost kind of bittersweet quality to Setsuna's core theme in the soundtrack. I've always loved, and so that's the kind of stuff that really landed 00 onto my list.
Great score, Kenji Kawai. You cannot fucking go wrong. I have nothing but good things to say about 00. Just missed my list. It was one of those in contention for number 10. I went with the Origin, you went with 00, and I'm glad we got to talk about both of them. Fantastic scores.
Yeah, I think we were in a very similar spot with how we were ranking those. And like,
yeah,
I think Jonathan's going to go Origin, and I think I'm going to go 00. And I think it makes sense to me that that's like how we fall on those.
My number 9 is one that I know for a fact is on your list and probably a little bit higher, and that is Gundam Build Fighters by Yuki Hayashi. Fantastic score. Gundam Build Fighters is such... I mean, we sang its praises on the last episode when we wound up ranking Build Fighters so high. And one of the things about that is just... Here's the thing. The Build Fighters soundtrack is not one I necessarily listen to a lot on its own. I like it. Why it ranks this high is because of how fucking electric it is in the show and in the moments. Like, every time you kick into that main theme when they're starting up, their battle system, and you have the, like, weird voices on the soundtrack going, 10, 9, all the, like, music and all of the countdowns. It is such a creative and varied soundtrack. It gives me very big Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth vibes, which is one of my favorite video game soundtracks. It's got fucking attitude in a way that I feel like you don't see a lot in shows today. It feels like the kind of like big experimental score you'd maybe get more in the 90s or something, and I really love that about it. And I'm sure you will have much more to say about it, so I'll keep it short. But Gundam Build Fighters would not be Gundam Build Fighters without Yuki Hayashi's music, so it is on this list.
Yeah, I will say it is on my list and it is higher. But yes, I agree with everything you said, and I'll have more to say when I get to mine. My number 9 is Mobile Suit Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans, the soundtrack by Masato Yokoyama. I fucking love this soundtrack to death. There is like a hardcore piratical fucking vibe to the Iron-Blooded Orphans soundtrack that I adore. Particularly all the stuff around Tekadon and their main themes. There's a lot of like great use of very high woodwinds like flutes and piccolos that are played in it. And by piratical, I mean like pirates, right? Like there's a naval feel to it, which fits a lot of the style of Iron-Blooded Orphans, particularly the combat or like battle sequences. There's lots of like really nice plucked string instruments, right? There's like, you do a little bit of fiddling. There's not violins on this soundtrack. There are fucking fiddles on this soundtrack, which is true of one other Gundam soundtrack that is also higher on this list. But there are lots of like cellos and stuff like that, that for the Tekadon stuff is all plucked. It's not played with a bow, and it's plucked very tightly. And so it's almost like in a guitar sense, it's similar to a palm mute. And that creates this very folksy Navy kind of vibe to it that I love. That like I think just communicates so much of the like the danger and the like chaotic life that the orphans all lead comes through in the music. And then there's just also any of like the daily life tracks. Like one of my favorite tracks from season 2 is Daily Life of Tekadon, which is just a sort of like walking around the ship kind of song. That's just a cello that's getting plucked with these very low notes, just doom, 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 and you get some drums coming in, and it feels like it would be playing in the back of like the cafe or whatever, or like with the mess hall in the main ship of Iron-Blooded Orphans, and you could just see all the kids like eating their food, and it's got this very kind of chill vibe in the back. There's also some really great stuff that's done with the Gjallarhorn themes, where the Gjallarhorn themes are where it moves really hard in the opposite direction. It becomes very orchestral and symphonic. That's where all the people on the strings instruments have to get their bows out and do the big, long, sweeping kind of notes played on their string instruments that is contrasted so beautifully with the main stuff that you get from the Orphan side of things. But my favorite thing about the Iron-Blooded Orphan soundtrack is that Season 1 and Season 2 have two different main themes. So you have the Iron-Blooded Orphans theme, which is what it's called for Season 1. And then Season 2 introduces a new core theme called Crescent Moon, which is a variation on the original theme, but that is darker and reflects so much the change of the style of the show. It loses a lot of the woodwinds. It loses a lot of the freedom you feel from the first half of the show, and it's much more constrained and darker. And it's much heavier in vibes. Masato Yokoyama, the composer, does a lot in the 2 seasons of working in the leitmotifs from the core themes and the way that reflects in the instrumentation, and peppers that throughout the whole show and a lot of the key moments. And then once you move to Season 2, all of that stuff is done, but now it's this modified version of the theme called Crescent Moon. And there's just an artfulness and a tastefulness to how that reflects the narrative that is also being told through that music that I find hugely impressive. So like if you just want to listen to music from the soundtrack, just going to the Season 1 soundtrack and listening to the top song, the main theme, and then going to the Season 2 soundtrack and listening to the top theme, Crescent Moon, like that tells you the whole story of the show kind of in 2 parts just by listening to those 2 like 4-minute pieces of music. And I think that that's like massively impressive.
Absolutely. It's a great score. I agree with all of that. Did not quite make my list.
Wow.
But don't take that as a snub of my affection for it. It is a great score. I did not have as like strong a personal relationship with it as you described there, but it is fantastic.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So what is your number 8, Jonathan?
My number 8 is the score for Reconquista in G by Yugo Kanno. Something that I think is really interesting about Tomino's post-Char's counterattack work is that he clearly gets composers and directs them to do music that is kind of counterintuitive to what a mecha show is, in the same ways his shows are counterintuitive to what a mecha show is. So Victory Gundam, Turn A, and Reconquista all have scores that I think have an affinity with each other, and all 3 of those are on my list in different places. Victory and Turn A are both higher. And I think, Victory very much sort of embraces this kind of pastoral world masterpiece theater kind of music and does that very beautifully, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And Turn A Gundam obviously does that, plus every other thing under the sun, because Turn A is kind of like the title of the show. It's like, let's get every type of music we can in here, every type of instrument. Reconquista in G, I think, has a little bit of both of those, and it is such a creative and playful score. It has so much music that is so joyous. You know, there's the kind of like folksy theme, the da da na 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 na, that kind of. I'm doing a terrible version of it, but it plays in a lot of scenes that I have in my head whenever I think of that show. You know, it's a score that I really enjoyed listening to in the show. I think it helps give the show a very distinct identity, and it's one that when I put the soundtrack on my phone and started listening to it, it became a go-to. Gundam music is something I often use when I'm grading papers, and it became a go-to Gundam soundtrack for me for that, because it is like Turn A, like the original Gundam, like some of my favorite Gundam soundtracks. It has just a ton of variety to it in what it's doing, and so many different dynamic things that are not, again, don't sound like what you would get from your typical mecha show or your typical action show or anything like that. It's very much playing in the same idiosyncratic form that I think Tomino is with the show itself. It also amuses me that that Yugo Kanno is not Yoko Kanno, but their names are 2 letters off, which is kind of funny for 2 back-to-back Tomino Gundams, back-to-back by 15 years, but you know what I mean. Yeah, so Reconquista in G would not be what it is without its music, and it's also just a score. You know, so much of how this is judged for me is how much do I like listen to the score on its own myself, and this is one that I keep coming back to and could rise higher in the years to come. It's a relatively recent one for us and for me on this show, but I really love this score.
That's interesting. G-Reco is not on my list. I like the soundtrack a lot, but I don't think I'm ever drawn to listen to it that much outside of the context of the show. I think for me, it ends up, for me personally, being overshadowed by the Turn A soundtrack. Not to say that they're identical or anything, but like they are stylistically somewhat similar. And as you say, the composer's name is almost identical in a way that feels cosmically insane. But I think it's a great soundtrack. I'm glad it's on your list, because it didn't quite make it for mine. It is like one that's like a notch below Victory and Origin to me. If we did like a 13 or 14 list, it would be above anything else.
Nice. Well, there you go. That's my number 8. What's your number 8?
All right, my number 8 is the soundtrack to Mobile Suit Gundam Seed, and basically Seed Destiny, because they're both by Toshihiko Sahashi. And they share lots of leitmotifs and stuff like that. They're stylistically the same. Seed is my favorite of the 2. But Seed Destiny also has this. It is the one thing you can say about Seed Destiny. The music's fucking great. Like, no matter what is else going on in that fucking show that ends up being a total trash fire, like, the music is amazing. And if you just listen to the soundtrack to Seed Destiny on its own, you can half convince yourself that it's a good show, because the music tells the story so effectively. And it's one of the things I think I love about Toshihiko Sahashi's music in the Seed series is it's very great at telling the music evolves very dramatically as the show goes on, and it's very good at selling the change in the emotional space, and that's really true of Destiny. And it feels like in many ways I kind of think that Toshihiko Sahashi maybe understood what the story of Seed Destiny was better than anybody else involved in that production, because his like ear for exactly what kind of music is suitable and like what kind of leitmotifs to build and how to deploy them to tell the story is so strong that when like he's doing that shit on Seed Destiny in that one little bright patch in kind of the middle-ish section of the show, like the early middle section where you think like, oh man, Seed Destiny might actually end up being okay, and that's right before it crashes and burns spectacularly. It's kind of his music that convinces you of it, because it's just incredible. One thing I love about his music is there's a huge amount of variety. I think a lot of it is borrowed from, there are like references kind of to the original Mobile Suit Gundam soundtrack peppered throughout the soundtrack to Seed. It normally is in a very kind of symphonic space, but every once in a while you'll get a track that drops into this very interesting, more kind of funky 70s space. The most distinct example of that is there's a track on Seed called The Three Evil Machines that is basically just like a disco funk track that sounds like it could be pulled like right out of the soundtrack to Mobile Suit Gundam. It's a song that plays in some of the fight scenes where the 3 kind of Cyber New Type-ish characters from Seed are in there. And so it's their kind of battle theme, and it's just very weird and funky. And you could see like a blaxploitation movie trailer playing over the top of that track, basically. It's crazy. And so you do get a lot of weirdness on the edges that I think is really effective and is pulling in this larger kind of world of Gundam that Seed kind of references in places. That happens in the music also. But then the main stuff in the show that I think is really remarkable are all the kind of What I think of in my head is like the sad Gundam music, right? Every Gundam show needs to have its sad music because Gundam is a very sad franchise usually that has very sad shit happening. And Seed has this really sort of introspective quality to its music that I think reflects Kira's personality in the show. That the tracks Sadness and Remembrance from the original Seed and the leitmotifs generated from those two tracks early in the show that then are generated throughout the rest of the show that reflect Kira. Is Sadness is like his introspective side of him, and then Remembrance is about his relationship with Othran. And so whenever that dynamic is being explored in the show, it pulls in leitmotifs from that Remembrance track that I think is just really powerful. And then when you get into Destiny, it kind of transforms into this third track that's in that same style and pulls some similar elements called If You Believe. That is a track that is like very much from the perspective of the older characters like Othran and the Captain Talia. That plays whenever they get kind of wistful and are thinking back on like how they have gotten to the place they are. This track, If You Believe, plays in Destiny that like hits me in the stomach really hard because I just think it's so beautiful, and it communicates like this feeling of age and of having moved past this conflict but never like really getting over it, or like it's still kind of like weighing you down. That again, if the rest of Destiny could communicate that feeling, Destiny would have been a great show. And then the last thing I want to say about the Seed soundtracks is that the fucking battle music kicks 100 different kinds of ass. My favorite one is the song Strike Charges. Has the most wicked fucking guitar solo that is embedded in this big, crazy symphonic battle scene with like crazy string instruments going nuts all over the place, super heavy drums. There's a great piano part in there. That like Strike Charges is just like this incredibly hectic, intense song that just again, it's one of the songs where Seed really lets its like hair down in the soundtrack and just like lets itself rock out for a little while. With its usually more in this like purely symphonic space, and whenever it lets itself do that in the more intense moments, I think the soundtrack like really shines, and you see the whole variety of what it has to offer. So I've always really loved the soundtrack to these shows, even as much as I've despised Seed Destiny. I've listened to that soundtrack a lot over the years. I think it says a lot about how good the music is that I can hate the show to death and still love the soundtrack a whole lot.
Yeah, absolutely. They're great. They're not on mine. I love the Gundam Seed music. It's a strong part of those shows. They're not quite part of my like regular rotation, but obviously I think we talked about it on the podcast, a lot when we reviewed them. It's a huge strength of those shows. Very like bold sort of modern movie score kind of music for Seed, and it's something that's really fun about those shows.
Yeah.
Absolutely. My number 7, I hinted at it in my last one, but this is Mobile Suit Victory Gundam by Akira Senju. Just a masterpiece of a score. It's something like the show itself, where you watch it, you hear it, and you think it's good. And then it kind of sits with you, and every time you revisit it, it's stronger. This is one that I find I kind of take for granted until I put the soundtrack on and listen to it, and I'm kind of swept away by it. Akira Senju's done lots of anime that I've seen. He did one that, I say recent, it's like 10 years old now, but Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is also a very good score by him. But I just think Victory Gundam is the best thing I've heard from him, and it is so, I think, in keeping with the goals of that show, in that it can break your heart in 10 different ways and be very sad and dark. But it is also just kind of unspeakably beautiful. I think there's something about the quality of the strings and this very, again, kind of, it's a very kind of classical music style, very pastoral in the same way that the show is. And we talked about the show's animation is very much playing on sort of early 70s anime in the kind of world masterpiece theater tradition, or what Hayao Miyazaki and Isao Takahata were trying at the time to call the manga eiga, the like manga film, say like trying to coin that instead of anime because they kind of considered anime to be low. That they lost that argument over time, but that was kind of the argument there, and trying to make like higher quality animation for TV. And so you got these very like upstanding kind of like beautiful pastoral sort of animes like Anne of Green Gables or something like that. And Victory is very much taking from that aesthetic for its Earth material. And I think the Senju music sells that honestly as much as the visuals. It really does sound like it could be a score to like one of those classic like world masterpiece adaptations of a great book, something like that. and it's one of my favorites when I go back and listen to it. I did not pick out individual tracks for all of these, Sean, but I will say Victory Gundam is one that's a 3-album soundtrack. It was split over 3, and I kind of cycle through those 3 also when I'm need something in the background that is sort of peaceful, which is kind of funny for a show that is as horrifically violent as Victory Gundam is. That is the overwhelming thing I get from the music itself, and I think it's a key emotion that helps sell the entire project of that show. And it's just, when I think about, music that is so key to making the show that I love work the way it does, I think this is just a huge part of how that show thinks, is the Akira Senju music.
Yeah, it was very close to making onto my list. Because it was something when I sat down to make the list, in my head I was like, the Victory Gundam soundtrack's absolutely going to be on a top 10 list. And then when I actually was like making the hard choices of like, oh fuck, really? Oh my god. And it's one of those, if you could just push it out to 12, it's like it'd be easy there, but it just didn't quite make it onto mine. But it was another one where I knew that it would definitely be on yours because I know that you responded really strongly to it. Yeah.
Oh shit! I just learned Akira Senju wrote the score to Triangle Strategy, the game for this year. Well, the
Final Fantasy Tactics game.
Fuck. Now I haven't played that yet. I've been wanting to. I haven't. That might be the thing that pushes me over the edge to playing that game. That sounds cool because that's a composer who doesn't have something every year or something.
Right.
But when he does, I feel like they're pretty special works. So anyway, yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay. Anyway, that was my number 7. What's yours?
My number 7, one that you talked about earlier, Jonathan, is the soundtrack to Gundam Build Fighters by Yuki Hayashi. I kind of put Build Fighters Try in here also because it's a very similar soundtrack. But this is one where I think Build Fighters is very clearly the superior soundtrack over Try. It's a lot more music than Try was. Try reuses a bunch of stuff from the original Build Fighters.
Don't forget, Try was made 3 months later.
Yes.
Build Fighters has a mountain of music, so it makes sense that they did that. But yes.
That's not me saying that this is bad necessarily. That's just why Build Fighters is the one that I credit as this is the one of those two that gets the specific placement.
I did the same thing, so yeah.
Yeah. So Yuki Hayashi is a composer that I really liked a lot of his other work. The big thing I think he's known for is the soundtracks to My Hero Academia, because those soundtracks are incredible. And you can definitely see where I feel Build Fighters is experimenting with some of that stuff. Particularly the main theme of Build Fighters has a bunch of musical ideas in it that he then uses very clearly in the main action theme, You Say Run, which is a hugely iconic theme from My Hero Academia. And it's one thing that's interesting about the soundtrack is you just kind of hear him experimenting with some stuff that feels in his next project that came out shortly afterwards with the same director, that a lot of those same musical ideas are sort of expanded on even more. But Build Fighters, just top to bottom, is a fucking amazing soundtrack. If you're looking for variety in a soundtrack, Build Fighters is where you want to go. There's so many styles, partially because one of the things the soundtrack does is it adopts different styles for the different places the characters come from. So if you want this cool sort of Italian cafe theme that feels like it could be played by a band playing outside and you're getting an espresso in Italy, then any of the Fellini's music really has that style. I'll talk about the flamenco guitar stuff on Meijin Kawaguchi's themes is just fucking legendarily good. And so that instinct of the soundtrack to adopt different styles for the different characters is amazing. But the core style that is this sort of electronic music that mixes in occasional bits of symphonic compositions, that is very much what My Hero Academia does, is also incredible. And that's where you get some of the tracks like Build Fight, which is the one that has the weird robot countdown 5 4 in it, and so then good. It's fucking amazing. It just gets you pumped every single time. Also, I'll say all the slice of life music that is there's a whole type of song on the soundtrack that is just the we're building a Gunpla songs that are also fucking great. And if you are building a Gunpla, those are fun songs to listen to because it captures that mood really well. But I think my favorite thing about the Gundam Build Fighters soundtrack is what it does with the kind of mid-show split between the first half of the show, which is the build-up to the big tournament, and the second half of the show, which is the tournament. And those two halves are the two different CDs, basically, of the soundtrack. And all of the CD2 stuff is basically evolved versions of the themes from CD1. So basically every major character gets 2 different themes, and it's not just leitmotifs that are altered and modified and stuff. They are different songs, but are done in similar styles. So like my favorite track in the whole soundtrack is the Meijin Kawaguchi's original theme, which is the Crimson Comet, 3 times the passion of a normal flamenco, which is one of the best fucking song titles of all time. And it becomes 6 times the passion of a normal flamenco in his season 2 or like second half theme, basically, from the main tournament. And that's where you get this like crazy fucking flamenco guitar. It's got this like whole Spanish guitar vibe to it that is fucking crazy, but goes so well with his whole weird aesthetic, the sunglasses and the Zaku amazing and everything. And when the chanting and the big drums come in after the huge flamenco solo at the top of the song, you just know that like some real hardcore shit's going to happen. That's amazing. You've got Mao's whole themes that are done in the similar style to the like really hard electronic style of the opening themes to Afterward Gundam X, which is where his Gundams are from. He kind of like adopts some of that style of like Resolution and Dreams and pulls that in and uses that. In particular, the main tournament theme is really intense and fucking crazy. And then also the evolved version of Build Fight that has the countdown, but that's the one that does the full 10 countdown in the main tournament is just incredible. So it's like top to bottom, it's just like banger after fucking banger on that soundtrack in like a dozen different styles. And then he like one-ups himself and goes even further with those styles when it hits the main tournament, all while never losing like the heart in the sort of perspective in the core elements of the soundtrack, which reflects Reiji and Sei's journey, obviously, in their friendship and all the like the main theme and the main leitmotifs from the main theme that are peppered throughout some of the other daily life tracks and stuff always center you on that. But when the shit kicks off in the battle scenes, that's where that soundtrack really comes to life. So it's one I've just listened to a lot for like 5-6 years at this point. Because I fell in love with it the first time I heard it, and then I watched My Hero Academia. I'm like, I can't believe, oh my god, this sounds like the Build Fighters music. It's also amazing, and then it's like it's the same dude. And I've been listening to a lot of that guy's soundtracks for a while. So great
that
soundtrack.
Honestly
it's my number 7.
That honestly is the thing that makes me want to watch My Hero Academia more than anything. Because I have not ever seen that show, but like the prospect of more Yuki Hayashi music is the reason I feel like I would want to watch My Hero Academia. Not to put out any other elements of it. It's the whole Gundam Build Fighters team did that. So anyway, that's really cool.
It's so good.
So good. We love it. Another one that I think is in a similar vein. Love this one. You'll notice it's a little lower on my list than it has been before, because I think there's some things that we hadn't talked about yet that I think maybe supplant it, but it's still my number 6. Is Mobile Fighter G Gundam by Kohei Tanaka. Kohei Tanaka, the composer we love on this podcast, did some of our favorite game scores ever with Gravity Rush. Is the main composer on One Piece, has been for 25 fucking years, you know. Yeah. But Mobile Fighter G Gundam...
That's a steady goddamn paycheck, man. Holy shit.
It's 50 episodes a year and a movie every couple of years. It's great. Video games, all sorts of stuff. Kohei Tanaka is wonderful. And Mobile Fighter G Gundam, I think, has the distinction of being the sexiest Gundam soundtrack because, goddamn, that saxophone is the thing that makes me love this soundtrack. It is, it honestly has a lot in common with Gundam Build Fighters. I think Yuki Hayashi... That's one of the many ways Build Fighters learns from G Gundam, is I think it takes some of its inspiration in the music, in that Kohei Tanaka was a very different kind of composer than Gundam had at the time when they hired him for G Gundam, and very much clearly had the directive of, like, I think, tonally bringing this world to life in all of the different areas, all of the different, countries that are participating in the big Gundam tournament, and has a lot of fun in a similar way as Yuki Hayashi. And I think the Hayashi soundtrack does a better job with that, like, different parts of the world thing than Kohei Tanaka does. But the thing Kohei Tanaka does is he just makes it sexy, because that sax is so smooth, and it's over everything. The saxophone is my favorite fucking instrument. That and piano. It's why I like the jazzy stuff. Gundam Thunderbolt, I will say, is a little higher and is maybe the thing that kind of like nudged G Gundam down a tad. Not because I think it's worse, it's just Thunderbolt is even more to my taste. But man, Mobile Fighter G Gundam, it is the best thing about that show is the music. The music sells the fights better than the fights do. The fights in G Gundam visually are pretty bad. But you put the music on, you put the Shining Finger theme over those fights, and it will get you pumped every fucking time, no matter how repetitive it is in the first half of the show. Every time it's just, I'm losing, shining finger. But you know what? You get the Tanaka music every single time, and it still gets you hyped up. And that is the miracle about the G Gundam soundtrack. And then that sax that plays over everything. It's playing in my head right now. Pure, smooth, wonderful, great fucking soundtrack.
It is a little bit higher up on my list, so I'll talk about it there. But yes, it is an all-time great soundtrack. I think it's very interesting our number 6 is, Jonathan, because my number 6 is Mobile Suit Gundam Thunderbolt by Narayoshi Kikuchi.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm sure that you're going to have a lot to say about this one. But like, I'll say one thing that is interesting that I found in trying to do some Thunderbolt stuff is when we get to our like top 40 songs list, I couldn't find a way to fit any of the insert songs from Thunderbolt on that list, even though I thought they would be there.
I didn't either. Same thing, yeah.
There was something about listening to it that it's like, I love these songs, particularly Dreaming Girl and Me is my favorite. We talked about that when we talked about the full thing, and it's like that Skeeter Davis song, and it's just like, it's a great song. But it's like, it's too closely tied to the show. Like, it's like, it doesn't feel to me like it is a song like an OP-ED opening or ending theme or an insert song. It just feels like an indelible part of the soundtrack that isn't separable from the show or separable from the soundtrack. It just feels like it's part of the soundtrack. In the same way that Groovy Duel does, right? Groovy Duel is obviously not a thing that we would rank in our top 40 opening themes, ending themes, or insert songs, because it's not either of those things very clearly. And I think that's like, it says something about the way that Thunderbolt treats its soundtrack, that's the way it feels. I think that's like a credit to the show, that how thoroughly and completely stylistically integrated all the music that they wrote, whether it's lyrical songs that would technically be like an insert song situation, or whether it's full instrumental music that is like just showing off Narayoshi's Kikuchi's like crazy fucking jazz chops to the nth degree. Like, they are the same fucking thing on that soundtrack, and they occupy the same roles in the same function. And they're tied so intimately to the characters that they represent, right? With the jazz being the Gundam character, and the sort of 1950s, 60s style pop songs representing the Zaku character. And that style to me is so incredible. I mean, you know, I like, jazz is a thing I like, if not the thing I listen to all the time, but 50s, 60s pop music is a thing I listen to all the time. So like, the way that those songs capture that style so perfectly and have this way of evoking specific iconic music from that period and specific songs from that period without replicating it, but being very much their own songs that remind you of it and feeling so completely 100% authentic. Even when they're in Japanese, or they're like, sometimes they're supposed to be English lyrics, but they're sung by a Japanese singer that is clearly not an English native singer. So it's kind of hard to understand the lyrics just by the way she says them. But like, that part of it is irrelevant. Like, the fact that it's a Japanese song, or it's made by Japanese composers, it so completely captures the style of American and British music from that period that they're trying to replicate. And then the fucking jazz is just fucking crazy and amazing, and particularly the way it's integrated into the show, into the fight scenes, into those big, like, distinct iconic moments with the crazy visual presentation, is so like just kind of completely bowls you over. And if anything, I think we talked about this on the Thunderbolt episode, like, one of the things about Thunderbolt 2 that holds it back is that it doesn't live up to how good Groovy Duel is. That Groovy Duel is a better song than they could figure out a, like, action sequence and, like, everything to sort of nail it. Where, like, it feels like the soundtrack has gone above and beyond the capabilities of what the actual show is doing. And that the soundtrack is, like, running at, like, 100 miles per hour, and the show is trying to keep up to it. If that isn't a testament to the quality of the soundtrack, I don't know what is.
It's amazing, you know, and on the point you made about the music feeling like it's these aren't songs, they're just part of the show. It's technically, Thunderbolt has very little score, because all the music is supposed to be diegetic. Now, often it is used as score, but virtually all music you hear in the world of Thunderbolt is music in the world of Thunderbolt. Like, the way I enjoy the Thunderbolt music is much more outside of the show than in it, as I like to listen to it, like, while I'm reading the manga even, because it's like, these are albums, like, from the world of this show that like this is a collection of the songs that our main characters are listening to, and that is very much how they approached the project, and it's the best single creative choice they made in the anime adaptation, and it's the thing that makes it, you know, so dynamic when it's on point, and the thing that makes it a little disappointing when it's not, because I think you and I both agree the better version of the Thunderbolt anime in the form that they did it would be to let the music be the majority of the soundtrack,
Yes.
and then do the visuals to that, because the music is so electric and so perfect.
Yeah, right. Because that's the thing I said on that episode, is that like I wish it was a silent show in the sense of that it didn't have dialogue. Like it's just the music and the visuals is enough to sell it. And yeah, like I think what you're saying is right, that there's something about the way that it's diegetically in that world and feels like it is just a part of that world, because it's not commentary on top of it. It is just in there, and it's what other characters are listening to and reacting to as well. Means that like it's impossible to create, for me, a psychological distance enough from a song like The Girl Dreaming in Me to be able to rank it in a top 40 list next to Beyond the Time or something. You know, it's like there's just two different kinds of music that I can't separate this from the show to be able to rank it separately on a different list. It was a thing that like impressed me so much about the soundtrack when I went through that process, that I was like, oh my god, I just like cannot conceptualize these songs as being separate from the rest of the from like the show and like the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, you know, here's an example. E.O. Fleming isn't he voiced by Nakamura Yuichi?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm. So Mr. Bushido himself, obviously a great voice actor. Still, I think the music does a better job of telling you E.O. Fleming's character than any of the dialogue or voice acting can. You know, it that gives you what you need to know about that character more than any of the dialogue could. So, yeah, it's a very special soundtrack, a little bit higher on mine. We'll talk about it more in a minute here. But that was your number 6, right?
Yeah. And I'll say that this is like, because really for me, it's like 6 and up is like the pantheon of Gundam music to me. Kind of starts with Thunderbolt. Not to say anything bad about anything lower than 6, but this is like the thing that I knew coming into this when I sat down to make the list. I knew exactly what 1 through 6 was, and then I went to like listen to the soundtracks. It didn't change my mind. I'm like, yes, this is exactly what my 1 through 6 is. It's like set in stone for me and my musical tastes. And like Thunderbolt kind of like starts that, of like I knew exactly where that was, and that had to be at least that high.
I would actually agree with that, because mine was I didn't have them ranked, but the 6 that I wrote down first are my top 6. Then I had to go rank them, but I would agree that I think 6 for both of us is maybe where you have the ultimate pantheon. And my number 5 in that pantheon is Mobile Suit Zeta Gundam, composed by Shigeki Saigasa. I could just as easily choose Mobile Suit Gundam Char's Counterattack here. Because Char's Counterattack is just a phenomenal score, and I really love the kind of concentrated listening of that. But Zeta Gundam is such a fucking font of phenomenal music. I love the entire Saigasa musical era of the show, and I think, you know, from Zeta to Double Zeta to Char's Counterattack gives that era of 80s Gundam such a clear identity, and such a big scope, because it gives it this very, like, cinematic heft. And I think that's the thing that was clearly Saigasa's directive, and the thing they pulled off beautifully well throughout all of these. But I think best in Zeta Gundam, which has, you know, there's multiple versions of the Zeta Gundam soundtrack. The one, if you don't have it, I will recommend. I think it's called the Zeta Gundam Special CD, and it's a 2 CD soundtrack. Well, you don't have to get it as a CD. Maybe you find it somewhere else. But a 2-disc soundtrack that arranges all of the music of Zeta into different suites based around the different either characters or themes or things that are happening. Double Zeta has a version of this too that I think is also the best way to experience the Double Zeta soundtrack. You know, so you have a suite about the Titans, and you have a suite about the Black Gundam, which is all the first, you know, the episode 1 music. You have a suite that is all about Forever 4, the music from that episode. My favorite suite is the one called Running Through Space, which is, or that's translated a couple different ways, but it's the one from the final episode, and you get all of that material and some of the main action themes. And just some of the most iconic Gundam music to me is from the Zeta soundtrack, some of the music that I think of when I think of Gundam music, and one of the main ones being sort of one of the main action themes from Zeta, that is the da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and they starts like that, and there's that beautiful staccato to it. It's a really amazing soundtrack. It has one of the best individual tracks in Gundam history, which is the instrumental version of From the Aqueous Star with Love that plays over the very final scene, obviously. And in general, it integrates... this is something, I mean, anime from this period always is doing well, which is integrating the theme songs and ending themes into the main score. The original Gundam does this very well also. And that is one of the most powerful moments of music in all of Zeta Gundam. But you'll find it everywhere. It is one of just the most dynamically scored pieces of television you'll ever watch, and is a real treat to listen to on its own, especially in that particular arrangement I mentioned, which really puts it all kind of in focus, and is a great way to experience that score.
Yes, it is on my list also. It's just a little bit higher, but yes.
Nice.
No collection of the best Gundam soundtracks would be complete without the Zeta music.
Yes.
To me, it's like Gundam music or something that's like in stone. But my number 5 is Mobile Suit Gundam Hathaway, or Hathaway's Flash, the soundtrack to the movie by Hiroyuki Sawano, taking the place for Unicorn Gundam, which used to be my number 5. And the kind of rule of let's make sure we keep it so these lists are boring where you're talking about the same thing over and over again, keeping Unicorn Gundam off the list and sort of simplifying that. And this is something we said when we talked about the movie, was like, I think for me, of like all the Hiroyuki Sawano stuff I've listened to, which is quite a bit of it, this is my favorite thing he has done. Because there is a like specificity to the music. There is the completeness to the soundtrack. Like, it's a soundtrack I listen to all the time. I mean, there's a fucking edge to it. Like, this is a soundtrack that you could fucking cut your goddamn throat on. It is so hardcore. Like, it's like basically what if Sawano just like got beat the fuck up by Vangelis in a back alleyway, and that's like half the songs on the soundtrack, right? Like, and for people who don't know, Vangelis is like the Greek guy who did like the soundtrack to Blade Runner and stuff like that. And so that really hard, just dirty fucking electronic vibe to it is all over the place in the soundtrack. Particularly my favorite track on the CD in that respect is UC0105. That just is so fucking intense. It's very authentically of that style. It doesn't feel like someone trying to ape that like hard, grimy 80s sci-fi electronic score. It is just like Sawano taking that, which is adjacent to his style that he usually does, but is definitely not the same thing he usually does, and integrating that so completely in the more kind of sweeping, epic thing that you get with Sawano in shows like Attack on Titan or Kill la Kill, or the original Unicorn Gundam soundtrack or narrative, and integrating this like just darker, heavier, grimier type of soundtrack into there. I think it moves the music even deeper into my personal taste, because those are like the Blade Runner soundtrack is a score I listen to all the time for just like background music and if I'm grading and stuff like that. But then it also reflects so perfectly the tone and style of the movie, right? Like, I feel like the music just expresses the whole world, this world that like is kind of like beyond hope, which is kind of what Hathaway feels like, right? You had the Axis shock, you had like the miracle that saved the world, but nothing has really fully changed, and you have Hathaway kind of wayward in that world as this terrorist that you're following, trying to find a way to change things and being kind of lost in that moment. And I think so much of the Hathaway soundtrack communicates that feeling. There's a song called Earth that plays that has a lot of themes in it that then like percolates through the rest of the later soundtrack. But it's early on when they're doing the fly over Earth, and you have all these beautiful shots of Earth. And you get this big sweeping, what is a more classical Sawano style composition with like big strings that come in, this big core, strong, very emotional melody that is reinforced really heavily. That gives you the sense of the beauty of Earth and also what is at stake. And the way that really kind of big, sweeping, beautiful music is then distilled through this harder edged, grimy electronica vibe in tracks like She or Chai, which is the same name as the Gundam Heat pilots, right? Or the track Car 5P3 / Penelope. The track names are also fucking crazy. I don't know how to pronounce half of them because they're just weird assemblages of numbers and letters that don't make any sense.
That's how he always does it. So
yes, that's how he always does it. So they're kind of sometimes hard to talk about. But I think it just communicates that sense of like technology and ennui and pessimism and cynicism and industry and like industry and human cynicism ruining this beautiful thing, and Hathaway being lost in how to fix that. I think is just communicated holistically and fully by the soundtrack. And I think that's the thing that impresses me about it the most, because Hiroyuki Sawano is an incredible composer. But if there's one complaint or criticism I could level towards him, is I think sometimes the music is too big. Sometimes the music is bigger than the moments that they call for. because I think his style is so epic, so intense, so incredible that every once in a while I'm watching one of his things, I think like sometimes the music is doing more work than the show is, and there's almost like a dissonance because it's like it's so hardcore. It's like dialed to 11 and the show's at like a 7, and then it doesn't quite match up. And I think he finds a better way to tone things in appropriately. I think part of it is because everything gets to be scored very intentionally for the movie, because it's a very tight soundtrack for the runtime of the film. And so everything feels like it's calibrated exactly for the moment that music is designed for. That is also true of like the insert songs, like the opener Mobius, and then Tracer, the song that plays in the middle, at like kind of like the dance party. Like all that stuff is so dialed in exactly to what the movie needs, that it just feels like Hiroyuki Sawano and Hathaway are like 100% on exactly the same wavelength and delivering the exact same message, the exact same story. One is just doing it with visuals and dialogue. The other is doing it purely with music. And that's the thing that I think really elevates it above Unicorn Gundam to be the Sawano soundtrack on my list.
So it's on my list. It's higher. Here's the thing, though. I did have an internal debate over whether I could say there's just one Sawano spot, because Hathaway's Flash is really different from Unicorn.
Yes.
And it's really different from anything else he's done. And I ultimately went with this just because, like, it was I wanted to showcase more shows and stuff.
Yeah.
And I love the Unicorn Gundam soundtrack, and I think that is up there with Attack on Titan as like your best of sort of your like classical, Sawano for scores. And he's one of my favorite composers. I also love his vocal albums. He's got 4 of those, the NZK albums, and those are some of my favorite things to listen to. I really, really like it's some of my favorite kinds of scoring and music is what he does. And I agree with you that Hathaway is the best thing he's done in terms of scoring. And I think he hasn't actually done a lot of movies. He's done a lot of TV shows and stuff in his own albums. I think there's something about having Hathaway be a very tight, 95-minute movie that gives you this canvas to be very precise on. And it is actually there are big motifs, but it is less motif driven. There are big moments, but those big moments are sort of further and far between than in Unicorn or in Attack on Titan or something like that. And it is a lot of like, and this is a kind of scoring I really like, and is I think often done poorly, is the just kind of experimenting with sounds and kind of a grungier, grimier electronic style, and just letting sort of moments be created through atmosphere in the sound design that is the music. And there's so much of that over the course of Hathaway. And I have listened to the soundtrack many times. It's one I always have to listen to front to back when I put it on. And I like it more every single time I hear it. And I'll wait to say more because it is higher on my list. But we agree it's fucking brilliant. So there you go.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say of like why I think for me personally Hathaway wins out over Unicorn in the Sawano debate, because I feel the same way. Like this is not like Seed or Seed Destiny or like Build Fighters and Build Fighters Try, where I kind of feel like it's fine to credit them together because they're so similar.
Yes.
It's a continuous work effectively from the composer's point of view. That is definitely not the case with Unicorn and Hathaway. But for the sake of like variety and everything, it feels right to say only one Sawano track is on there. One of the reasons or a framework you can look through about why it's Hathaway, not Unicorn Gundam, is that the Hathaway soundtrack is what if the Unicorn Gundam soundtrack fucked, and that is what the Hathaway soundtrack is.
I think that is a good way to say it. My number 4 is Thunderbolt by Narayoshi Kikuchi. We talked about it a bunch earlier. I love it. The thing I am most taken by, and I don't feel I need to say a ton because we talked about it so much on the Thunderbolt episode, is the free jazz. I think it is amazing that you have, this manga that establishes this is the stuff E.O. Fleming likes to listen to. And the manga even specifically name checks actual jazz legends, like John Coltrane, right? And it's saying this is what he's listening to. And the anime says, okay, we're not going to try to get the rights to those jazz songs. We're going to do an original score with Narayoshi Kikuchi. Your goal is to write music that sounds good enough that it would be the thing that E.O. Fleming builds his personality around. And not only does Narayoshi Kikuchi rise to that incredible challenge of musical creation, I think he exceeds it with some of the best music I've ever heard written for movies or TV shows or anime. Groovy Duel being, I think, the absolute pinnacle of the Thunderbolt soundtrack. Maybe the best piece ever written for Gundam. It's definitely in the conversation. It's incredible. But, it is the real deal. It is just real, amazing, in a smaller package because it has to be a little more bite-sized for being in a TV show, but real free jazz, and it's some of the most dynamic stuff you'll ever hear. It's music that makes you want to move and do things and imagine in the way the best jazz does. It's a full body musical experience that you have to pay all of your attention to because it is just that active and good. And then you have all these amazing 50s and 60s pop pieces as well, and then some actual underscore in certain moments that is extremely well done. But man, that jazz sax, that's very different than, the smooth, sexy sax of G Gundam. That's one kind of sax I love. But a good jazz sax isn't quite smooth. It's like rough, and it is a different kind of sexy in your ear. And it is so experimental and avant-garde and on the fly and improvisational. And it is just a little miracle of scoring that this thing exists, and is one of my favorite pieces of Gundam, even separate from the show it exists on, which honestly the music has a bigger life for me than the show it's from.
Yeah.
So that's why it's my number 4.
All right, my number 4 is the soundtrack to the original Mobile Suit Gundam by Takeo Watanabe and Yuji Matsuyama. This Gundam fucking slaps, or this Gundam soundtrack slaps so fucking hard. I feel like I don't even know what to say about it. So one of the things about the Gundam soundtrack is it is fucking crazy. It is so stylistically weird. The mix of like weird 70s electronica and funk with like big sweeping cinematic symphony music is so unique. There's no other like show I've watched that quite has the combination of music that you get from Mobile Suit Gundam, right? Like you have the sad Gundam song Sense of Emptiness, which is to me, it's a short track. It's a short piece of music. As lots of pieces of music are for the original Mobile Suit Gundam, are not necessarily like big 4-minute songs. A lot of it is like, here's like 30 seconds to a minute long of music. But the sad song that plays at the end of some episodes, like the Isolina episode, is Sense of Emptiness. And it has this very mournful, like sad, deep feel like that. And then you've got a song like A Spy in Enemy Territory, which is one of the action songs that plays particularly around like Jaburo. They use it a lot. That is just like weird and intense. And it's like ba-dum, ba ba ba-dum, ba-dum. And it's like assaulting your senses. It's almost kind of like a similar thing that Hathaway does. It gets that like really grimy electronica vibe from the 70s with that. And then again, you then also have a lot of like weird kind of like disco-y feeling tracks in there in places throughout the soundtrack. And then you have one of my all-time favorite Gundam songs ever, it always has been and always will be, which is Gallant Char, which is one of the major battle themes from the original Mobile Suit Gundam. That just is that it's the kind of thing where it's musically unusual. It does not follow the same kinds of patterns and styles as you expect from a soundtrack, right? It is particularly once you start getting into stuff after Saigus's like Zeta Gundam stuff, I feel like a lot of the Gundam soundtracks become more homogenized. Not to say that they're all similar, they're still broadly different, but you get lots of stuff that's more in that like sort of broad symphonic orchestral space, like Victory Gundam, like Double O, even Iron-Blooded Orphans very much is in that same kind of space. Gundam The Origin, all that stuff kind of occupies that general area. And Mobile Suit Gundam is like sparse in places, it's aggressive in places, it's surprising, it's unusual. It's got a bunch of great, weird, offbeat insert songs like Char Gakuru, like Here Comes Char, like that kind of stuff that's integrated into the soundtrack in awesome ways. And then also, like, for me, the movies are effectively a part of this as well. I'm not really separating out the movie soundtrack and the show soundtrack because it's a continuation. And especially if you are including the Daisuke Inoue songs, which I think you really should, that is one of the things that also really builds out the whole sonic space of Gundam. That to me is just like, it's like the iconic music of the franchise. This is the thing that like all other Gundam soundtracks have to live up to, how good that original Mobile Suit Gundam soundtrack was and how weird, offbeat, and experimental it was in so many ways. And it's a thing that when you hear some of those main iconic themes replicated occasionally in stuff like Unicorn Gundam or very prominently in Gundam The Origin, it's like the fucking like drop kick of nostalgia to your chest that you feel is so intense, in the way that I get with music that I would associate with like the music of Star Wars or like the music of The Lord of the Rings or the music of Halo. That kind of stuff to me, that all that's like stuff that I watched when I was a kid, and I have that feel. I get that exact same thing from listening to Mobile Suit Gundam music, because it's not just that like I love this thing and I do have a nostalgia for it, but it's like an adult nostalgia, right? I watched Gundam when I was like 22, I think, is when I started watching it, 21 or 22. And so it's not a thing that is like a distant part of my life, but the quality of the music is so distinctive and iconic and has nostalgia, I think, kind of structured into the way that the music is actually written, that it gives me that same kind of like deep in my stomach, like pure raw feeling of like joy and recognition. And it's like, to me, like an indelible soundtrack in the world of anime. So it is obviously one that for me is clearly in the top pantheon of Gundam soundtracks.
I agree. It's a little bit higher on mine. One thing I'll just add to what you're saying, just to just add one note, is as varied and unique and idiosyncratic as the music to Gundam 79 is, play me 1 second of any track on any soundtrack, and I will know what it's from. It's in the same way Halo or Star Wars or Lord of the Rings, like you said. It is so utterly distinctive, and I think that's something that is one of the miracles of that soundtrack for how varied and idiosyncratic it is.
Yeah, and that, like, I could describe, if it's a track from the show, I could probably describe to you about 5 to maybe a dozen scenes, depending on the song, that it is playing over, right? Like, it is so distinct and, like, it, like, buries itself deep into your memory, in that way that the best music associated with a franchise or, like, you know, a property like Star Wars or something like that is. It's just, like, it feels like if you, like, dissected me and took a magnifying glass to like my brainstem, you'd see a little like picture of the soundtrack albums for Mobile Suit Gundam, because that's like imprinted deep into my brain.
Yes. Which is a reason why it's a little higher for me. So there you go. That's our number 4s. The top 3, I just want to stress, I would be happy with my top 3 in any order, but I had to do the Marie Kondo, which sparks the most joy for me. What wound up at number 3 is Yoko Kanno's indelible, amazing score for Turn A Gundam. Absolute masterpiece of a soundtrack. Yoko Kanno, who, I'll just put my cards on the table right now, I think the best soundtrack ever written for television, anime or anything, is her Cowboy Bebop soundtrack. I mean, I think that is just, for like a lot of the reasons, frankly, I think about Gundam Thunderbolt. I think like Thunderbolt is like the little brother of the Cowboy Bebop soundtrack in doing similar kinds of things. So Yoko Kanno is one of the most talented people ever, and it will never not amaze me that she does Cowboy Bebop and Turn A Gundam essentially back to back. It's like a crazy fucking piece of like anime history. And the Turn A soundtrack is honestly a lot like the show itself. It is such a consistent, idiosyncratic surprise. It's full of all these hidden corners and these sort of surprising like passageways that lead you down all these unexpected paths, and every one of them is worth it. It's so many different genres of music, it's so many kinds of instrumentation, it's so many styles. It's a real cacophony of ideas, just like the show itself. And I think in that way, especially with the way it embraces like world music of instruments from Africa and from the Middle East and from all over the planet, to kind of create this story that I think is so important to Turn A, of just the importance of the earth and of the land and of traditions and cultures. Oh, that's my dog Phoebe. She's shaking. Sorry about that. It's okay, Phoebe.
She's like,
She's waking
you're
up.
talking about Turn A Gundam.
Yeah, she loves Turn A Gundam. She loves the music. She's waking up from a nap because she knew we were talking about it. But yes, I'm getting off track here because Phoebe came up here. But yeah, it's you talk about Turn A beautifully, Sean, so maybe I will wait for you to talk about it a little more, because I have a feeling it's higher on your list. But it's one of the best things ever. You know, a couple weeks ago, I said on Twitter, like, man, Groovy Duel in contention for the best Gundam track. And you sent me a link to the song, I think it's called Days, from the Turn A soundtrack. And I just sat down and listened to that and just kind of went into a haze, because it is such a beautiful piece of music that goes through. So it's a, you know, it's on the surface a very like simple, you know, happy, idyllic piece of music, but it goes through so many turns that feels like, you know, comparable to the kinds of turns Turn A itself is going through in its complexity, and I think is a very representative one. My favorite single piece from the soundtrack might be, it's from near the end of the 3rd soundtrack. It's called Colors of the Wind. That's the song that the first 10 seconds is what the eye catch comes from. The da 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 da. But the full song keeps going and is kind of this jazzy piece that you get to the end and you realize, oh, this is the woman who wrote the Cowboy Bebop soundtrack by the end of it, because it is also, and this is a theme for me, uses sax beautifully. But that is one that just like every time I listen to it, I feel like I'm discovering new themes from it. Yeah, I want to be clear. I think the top 3 for me are all fucking perfect pieces of scoring. This is the one that like maybe resonates with my taste just a little less than the other 2. But that is not to say anything other than that, like, and part of it is just like I know, Sean, have so much more to say about it in a way I feel like I have even more to say about my other 2, and that's why it ends up at number 3. But I have no disagreement about the fucking brilliance of Turn A Gundam's score.
Yeah, definitely it'll be higher up on my list, but yes, we'll talk about it there.
What's your number 3?
My number 3 is the music to Mobile Suit Zeta Gundam, or realistically, it's Zeta Gundam, Double Zeta, and Char's Counterattack, because again, it feels like a big contiguous work to me. By Shigeaki Saigusa. Zeta is like the easiest one to pick out of those, because it's like the most original music. It's the first one. And I want to echo what you said, Jonathan, about the special soundtrack. That is like the version that I listen to. This is the Gundam music I probably listen to the most as background music in working. And it's something that like I didn't do until I got my like teacher job. It was a thing where I would sometimes listen to Zeta music, but I didn't ever like listen to big stretches of Zeta music like uninterrupted for 30 minutes to an hour kind of thing. And it wasn't until like I have a lot of grading music and grading time that I need to spend and stuff like that then the Zeta soundtracks are one of my favorite to put on in that scenario, because there's something that it has that's almost the opposite of the Mobile Suit Gundam score. The Mobile Suit Gundam score we talked about has like, it's so iconic. It's like every piece of music feels incredibly iconic from Mobile Suit Gundam. I wouldn't really say that for Saigusa's thing. I don't think he's going for that. Instead, the musical style is so flowing and moves so beautifully from one piece to the next. It's one of the reasons why the special soundtrack, like compositional style of doing these kinds of suites of different themes and different tracks from the earlier releases and kind of combining them together thematically works so perfectly, is because I think the music is designed that way. It's designed to move like very fluidly from one piece to the next, from one emotion to the next, one set piece to the next, and never to draw complete attention to itself. It's more there to undercut and underscore everything that you are seeing, and for you to not even really think about the music being there. But when you do notice it, especially when you do listen to it, I think it like reveals how much depth there is to the musical composition on display, and how unique it is. Like, there is nothing that sounds like Saigusa's soundtracks for Gundam. Like, they are so unique. I particularly love everything he does with the strings when they get, like, all the Titans themes and stuff like that goes so low, so fucking low on those strings. And with these very sharp, hard, rapid notes, really, really low in the range. That is unusual. Like, you just don't hear stuff that sounds like that, and that like intensity of the like very low end of the strings coming in, and then some light electronical elements. Sometimes you'll get like a little bit of saxophone and stuff like that in there, and a little bit of piano just coming up and just breathing life into the scenes, into the emotion. And then you also have all these daily life kinds of tracks that have a very kind of light, jazzy kind of feel to them also, that is very contrasted to the very heavy and intense, very deep and serious kind of combat music you get through the battle scenes. And it's that thing of where it feels like it is the perfect music for what it is accompanying, right? It feels like it is so locked and fitted to the tone and style and world of Zeta, Double Zeta, and Char's Counterattack, which are three of the best things in all of Gundam, especially Zeta, which to me is like one of the best Gundam things of all time. Like, it's in that like all-time great pantheon, and the music is an indelible part of that. And of course, my favorite track, and the one that you mentioned, the track Conclusion, which is the instrumental version of From the Aqueous Star with Love, the second opening theme, is like the piece de resistance, because in Zeta, it only plays once. Or no, it's right, it plays twice. It plays when 4 dies, and then it plays at the very end of the show. And it's like, it's only those 2 moments where that track plays. And like the skill, I think, at holding that off and just using that, these 2 pivotal moments in Camille's journey in the second half of the show is so perfect. And when the show leads off with that, in this way that is beautiful and haunting and like kind of disconcerting, that you are left with Camille in the state he is in at the Zeta Gundam, and you have this song playing that is doing this interesting instrumental take on the main theme you've heard for like 25 episodes at that point. It really kind of sticks with you forever. Like, and it's that kind of moment that I think the music is so perfect and necessary. And Zeta Gundam is one of the great endings of any TV show. It's like one of the great moments in anime to me is like the last 2 episodes of Zeta, and that it's all crystallized at the end with that song conclusion that is a conclusion to everything that has come before it. Like, if you have not just sat down and listened to those suites of Zeta music, you owe it to yourself to do so. Because I think I had underestimated the Zeta soundtrack in the past because I had never heard it in that way and listened to it isolated, constructed thematically like that, which is much better than just going chronologically, or I think which is how the music used to be organized by like how it appeared in the show, which is what is pretty typical. But that's not the ideal way to consume the music. So if you do want to listen to it, listening to that special soundtrack, I think like really made the score come even more to life for me in listening to it outside of the confines of the show.
I wish we had soundtracks like that for more of Gundam and more of anime, frankly, because I think the typical thing is you get the soundtrack releases while the show is coming out. So most 50-episode Gundams have 2 or usually 3 soundtracks that the score is split over, and it's a great way to experience it. But like, man, I would kill for a version of this for Turn A specifically.
Yes.
I think there's a like one of the things that holds back is the wrong word. I obviously hold Turn A in very high regard, but is that the soundtrack, I don't love the sort of arrangement of it, and not the arrangement of the music, like the organization of it, I think. And I think there's probably a better way to make a soundtrack of it, and it helps that Zeta has that just incredible, and Double Zeta 2 has that as well. And I think the Char's Counterattack soundtrack, which was there from the beginning, is arranged very well in that same way. So yeah, absolutely great choice, Sean. My number 2, and when we say our number 2, you also know our number 1. My number 2 is Hathaway's Flash by Hiroyuki Sawano. We already talked about this a bunch. I don't know if I need to add more. Other than that, I think one of the only things holding this back from being number 1 is that it is an ongoing project, and in a couple years we will have the 3-part Hathaway movie trilogy score by Sawano that I think might very easily become my number 1. I adore Sawano's music to begin with. I've listened to scores he's done for shows I haven't even watched. I love his music so much.
Yeah,
and
too.
Yeah, it's so good. And I really do hold Hathaway's Flash as the best overall thing he's ever done. It's, if you like look at his albums, including his different vocal albums, which I love his vocal albums. His one, my favorite of his vocal albums is the one that it has some of the narrative Gundam music on it. I think it's called Remember. Yeah, it's Re/Member is my favorite of those. But honestly, my favorite single Sawano album is the Hathaway soundtrack. It is just such a fucking masterpiece. For all of the reasons we talked about earlier, and for one thing I think you identified, Sean, which is that it is such a good representation of the world as it exists in UC 105 when this story picks up, in that it is broken and violent in so many ways, but it is also beautiful and passionate in so many ways. And I think the ways it catches the dichotomy of the world is such an amazing thing. And I think to see Sawano and his style meet actual honest-to-God Yoshiyuki Tomino material, which is what the scripts for these movies are, is such a really cool collision, and to work in that world. It's one of my favorite things. It's my probably favorite single Gundam album to put on. One thing I hold in even higher regard is my number 1, but man, the Hathaway's Flash soundtrack, it's a masterpiece. It's my number 2. I'm glad it's there.
Yeah, like I just remember when we watched the movie and did the podcast on it, I think we both were like, because obviously we went in, because I think we knew that Sawano was doing the music, and we went in like thinking like, oh, it's gonna be good music, and then we both I think came out of that watching it to record the podcast being like, can you believe how fucking good the soundtrack is to Hathaway? Yes. It was just like, it's like revelatory, because again, you go into a Sawano thing expecting it to be really good, but you don't go in expecting it to be like, this is the best thing he's ever made, right? Like we both went on that podcast and we're like, is this the best Sawano soundtrack ever? Like that feels like a crazy thing to just say off the cuff, but it feels in our heart of hearts very true. And then with the distance we have, I think it is very true for both of us.
One thing to add to that, by the way, the sound mix for Hathaway's Flash is the best sound mix Gundam has ever had. And I think the way the Sawano music is mixed in there too is just, it is such a... Aggressive's the wrong word, because it's aggressive in places and it's very enveloping in other places, but it's such an all-consuming musical mix. Like, the Blu-ray has a specific full Dolby Atmos mix that is incredible, and I think the way the Sawano music plays in just space around you, this is something he's always been good at, even in just this, normal left-right stereo versions. There's so much 360-degree play to his music, and I think that is embedded in the whole sound design of the film as well, so it's so part of that movie.
Yeah, it's just one of the things that makes it such a revelatory movie to watch.
Yeah.
It's like it's that all those pieces, including the music, are all perfectly aligned. Especially when I feel like a lot of modern movies have like very frustrating sound mixes. Hathaway has it's just like dialed in absolutely perfectly. I think that's a very good point.
All right, your number 2.
My number 2, probably a surprise to nobody at this point because we could all figure out what's going on with the list. My number 2 is Mobile Fighter G Gundam by Kohei Tanaka. I have loved this soundtrack since I was like 8 years old or something, or at least the very least I have loved the Shining Gundam theme for like as long as I practically can remember, because I never watched all of Mobile Fighter G Gundam as a kid, but I did watch a couple of episodes on Toonami at the time when it originally came out over here post Gundam Wing, and that fucking Shining Gundam theme and the jazz and the like really harsh like note couplets that are played on the strings that interplay as the kind of the core melody, which is such a weird, interesting structure. That theme has been burned into my brain forever. It just imprinted itself on me. I think about it all the time. It's stuck in my head all the time. It was the thing that like when I played Gundam Breaker 3, you could put things on your mobile suit that would change the song that plays when you entered like a super mode. And I would always make sure that I had the thing that played the Shining Gundam theme, because if you go super mode, I need that fucking jazz to kick in. I need that weird string couplet thing to kick in. Like, I need the whole thing, because that is to me the epitome of what a super mode in Gundam. Like, I'm not usually big on the Super Saiyan Gundam shit, but if you're going to do it, that's the way to do it. And Kohei Tanaka cracked it. But it's a thing where it's like the whole soundtrack is amazing, and it's a big soundtrack. There is a lot of music. It is eclectic. It is weird. It is all over the fucking place, particularly when you get into some of the Hong Kong stuff. There are like really strange insert songs sung in Chinese.
They're so good.
Fucking amazing. And then especially if you get like the special soundtrack version that has the voice actors singing some of them in Japanese translations, is amazing. You can get Domon and Rain singing the like shopping song in Hong Kong. That's fucking nuts. The song that plays, that's like the Shuffle Alliance song when those characters come in for like the one episode they're alive for, is just like weird and offbeat and aggressive and unusual. So it's like, I think the thing that is like easy to fixate on is like the smooth jazz part that is sort of like the core spine that is very much a part of Kohei Tanaka's style. But there is like, one of the things that's great about G Gundam is it's not even really that it's trying to take world music styles the way that Build Fighters is. It does in places, but it's more that it's just like, it does whatever the fuck it wants. Like, it feels like Kohei Tanaka woke up one day, he's like, what's this instrument? Fuck it. I don't really know, but I'm going to use it, and just like creates a weird piece of music that you hear like 2 or 3 times in the show. And it is, I would say, the most eclectic soundtrack of any Gundam. Like, it's just, if you listen to the whole thing, it goes crazy. That's one of the things I love about it, because even when it goes crazy, it's Kohei Tanaka, and he like knows what the fuck he's doing. But it is those core themes that are the things that really stick out the most. It's the Shining Gundam theme, it's the Burning God Finger theme, like those sort of key themes that the show kinds of pins itself on, and then that turn into leitmotifs that are incorporated into other material. Like there's a version of the Shining Finger theme that plays in episode 1. That's like this mysterious version that you just get the hints of the core melody that is from like when nobody knows who Domon is, and he's like walking through this wasteland. And it's this weird kind of electronic version of the main melody that echoes very prominently throughout the sort of sonic space that it occupies. I think the track is called My Name is Domon, I want to say. And there's a lot of stuff like that where those leitmotifs are integrated into interesting ways throughout the whole soundtrack. And my favorite track on the in the Mobile Fighter G Gundam stuff, and like probably my favorite moment, like specific moment using music in all of Gundam soundtracks, is there's a track called Holding a Wounded Dream, which is a big, dramatic, romantic version of the Shining Finger theme that is in the second half of the show once they have moved away from the Shining Finger stuff, right? So if you remember the second half of the show when they go to Hong Kong, it introduces like a whole new suite of musical themes, including when he gets the God Gundam, the music changes to fit the God Gundam. So you haven't heard the Shining Finger theme in a long time. And then in the last episode, when Domon is having to face Rain, who has been frozen in stone basically, and has to finally, cut the shit out and confess his feelings and open up to her. You have this song that plays as he's giving this speech that is this very low dramatic or very slow dramatic version of the Shining Finger theme. And then when it gets to where it swells and it comes up in the main string couplets, the da-da, 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 that comes in on these very high, like really sweeping epic strings that are so piercing and so intense, and the core emotions of those note couplets that are played just like, I think it melts you the way it melts Rain, because that's then accompanied with Domon in the show saying, "Oh my god, skida! Oh my god, hoshi!" Which means I love you, I want you. And her bursting from the stone and falling into his arms, that being accompanied with this theme you have not heard for like 20 episodes of this show, coming back in this incredible reorchestrated form that to me feels like the ultimate form. Like, it feels like in his head this might have been the song he had, and he worked backwards from that to plant that, and that's actually where the like iconic version that it plays at the end of the fight from the first half of the show comes from, because it all feels like it's building up to this moment where it returns us back to Domon and Rain's core relationship from the beginning of the show, points out like the like bitter need and desire and want that has been suppressed in him, and letting that explode musically. It's just an incredible moment of music in any show. And it's one that whenever I think of G Gundam or whenever I listen to the soundtrack, I always have to make sure I go over and listen to that whole thing, the Wounded Dream track, and listen to the whole thing, because it makes me very emotional listening to it anytime.
Absolutely. It's a phenomenal soundtrack, and we all love it. I had it a little lower than you, but it's a masterpiece. Yeah.
Yep.
All right, moment of truth. My number one, you've already figured it out. It's the original Mobile Suit Gundam 79 and the movie trilogy. You have to have the movie trilogy in there, because so much of the best Gundam music comes from that specifically. Composed by Takeo Watanabe and Yushi Matsuyama. And lest we forget, a young Joe Hisaishi did do some work on the movie trilogy and is credited on, I think, movies 2 and 3, which I think is funny. This would be before Nausicaa or any of his, big famous stuff with Miyazaki and Takeshi Kitano. I think I had so much trouble figuring out what I was going to call my number one, Sean. And finally, I think you put it the best way, actually. You had this lower, but you put it the best way, where you talked about having, if you examined your brain stem, you would have the fucking Gundam soundtrack in there. That's what it is. It's almost like I'm not choosing it as my favorite. It just is when I think about it. It is Gundam music in the same way Halo is Halo music and Star Wars is Star Wars music. It is the music that I have the most affection for. And I'll tell you, this is something that is not being like considered for this episode, but the new Gundam movie, Kukuru's Doan's Island, is out there if you want to find it. And I might have found it if I wanted to. And maybe that soundtrack does some beautiful interpolations of Gundam 79 music, and that is the thing that made me think long and hard, the reason I fucking teared up at that moment in this movie is because I have such deep affection for this piece of music. And I think that's the thing that ultimately made me reconsider and put this at number one. And I'm happy I did, because it's the only one I put at number one that felt fully and completely right to me. And you named a bunch of the great songs like Gallant Char, Let Us Not Forget Amuro Departs, the piece of Gundam sad music, right? That is the quintessential sad Gundam music that plays at the end of episodes and is absolutely beautiful. But Gallant Char, one of the best pieces of Gundam action music ever. There's so much that is so idiosyncratic, but there's so much that is also just so beautiful and stirring and rousing. And I think the other experience that over the last year or two has really driven up the original Gundam music in my estimation is that sometimes I like to listen to music when I read manga, music from like the associated franchise. And I would do that when I read through the Big Gundam The Origin manga last summer, and I would turn on the different soundtracks to Original Gundam. And I have so many versions of the soundtracks. There's like a big, nice box that's the full TV, like Q by Q, like numbered with like, this is M1, this is M2, this is M3, right? And they have that for the movies as well. And I have those two boxes. I have the original like LP versions of Gundam, where there were a couple for the Original Gundam, the original LPs for the movies. And I would turn on various ones of these in different forms, and I just would... And that, combined with Yoshikazu Yasuhiko's drawings that I was looking at, would just well up so much emotion in me. And I realized what a deep, deep abiding connection I have to this music that is, as you explained, Sean, weird and kind of all over the map, but somehow has this central identity. There's also just something in me that is so attracted to like 70s and 80s anime music, where you would have the big horns and these kind of, you know, classical, you would have a lot of idiosyncrasy to it, but then you would come back to this kind of like sort of big, you know, almost like Hollywood movie scoring with the big horns and things like that. And often like beyond the actual means of the score, because maybe you're working with synthesized instruments and samples and stuff like that, and you're not always getting live musicians, but you're going to go for the fucking fences anyway. This is the same reason I love the fucking Dragon Ball Z soundtrack, you know, I think does a lot of similar things to this. And it is just, that is Gundam to me. You know, Mobile Suit Gundam 79 is my favorite TV show. Mobile Suit Gundam, the movie trilogy, is one of my favorite movies. The manga is my favorite manga. You know, like all this stuff, and none of it would be as I would love to that degree if it were not for these songs. And so it is my favorite Gundam soundtrack. And I know maybe that's a little basic as my number one, but it's the only one that just felt right to me, and so that's why it's there.
I can respect it, you know, like it's
Yeah.
I think we all agree that like once you're up into this kind of like top 6 territory, it's more like how are you ordering it, you know, like it's like how and in what way does it speak to you in that moment. Yeah, very nice. So my number one, I know I said it wasn't going to be on here, but it's G Savior, ha ha ha. No, my number one is the soundtrack to a little show called Turn A Gundam, the soundtrack by the incredible Yoko Kanno. Not Yugo Kanno, Yoko Kanno. They're both great composers. Don't get them mixed up. Yoko Kanno's score to Turn A Gundam, I have loved since I watched the show, obviously, but it was particularly upon rewatching it. I know that I talked about this a lot on the first year anniversary when we originally did the top 5 soundtracks topic, because where I rated this to the top there too. Is when I really did like a deep dive into the score, in terms of not just like listening to some of it casually, but really like fully listening to it, listening to the TV versions, listening to the versions from the 2 compilation movies, and then listening to the symphonic soundtrack. That is probably like, if you just want a concentrated version of the soundtrack, the symphonic soundtrack is probably where you want to go for that.
It's beautiful, yeah.
But like, I just think to me, Turn A Gundam it might be my favorite soundtrack to a TV show for sure. Like, I might even throw movies in there. Like, it's just one of my favorite soundtracks of anything. Because I think it's because like the themes and everything of Turn A Gundam speaks so much to me, and like I love the show so much, and the music is so indelible with that. And it's also just stylistically, I think it explores stuff musically I'm very interested in. That I think the way it combines your big sweeping symphonic stuff, which I think if you're looking for a symphonic styled soundtrack in Gundam, Turn A Gundam is the best there is with that. But combining that with this really folksy music, with really interesting acoustic guitar stuff. This is the one where I said on Iron-Blooded Orphans that there is one other soundtrack, at least in Gundam, that you could definitely say, those aren't violins, that's a fucking fiddle, is Turn A Gundam has some fucking fiddling in it. They fiddle, there are accordions, there are multiple tracks on the soundtrack that are not even like really instrumental. They are like industrial. It's just like, it's like fucking Slam or Smash or whatever the fuck that group is, where it's just like you're making percussive noises with real world objects smashing together. And there are several tracks like that. You have weird, like sort of like almost tribal chants or something like that. For a couple of the tracks to represent the different cultures and beliefs of people on Earth. And the kind of full sonic space that creates, right? That you have the classic symphonic stuff, where you have a track like The Final Shore, which is the big classical music piece that we talked about, like is so like perfectly a piece of classical music that you were half convinced that it wasn't even an original piece for this, and they like pulled it from something because it so feels like a German from the 19th century must have written this piece of music. It's so of that style. From that to like folksy dance music to full industrial music to like some of the more electronic stuff that they use for the Moon. Like I think there's a track I want to say it's called like Bass Landing or something like that. That is just like a 90-second like electric guitar like low key solo basically with some percussion on it. That is fucking great. And then you have like within the symphonic stuff you have the big stuff like the classical music, but then you also have these sort of similar to Iron-Blooded Orphans, the more kind of naval feeling or the like militia themes that have your high woodwinds, your flutes and piccolos in there. The da ba da ba da ba da 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 ba ba da ba da da ba ba, like that core theme, the militia theme that is played throughout and built up in all these ways that to me feels like the song that Wind Waker kept on trying to make a song as good as but never quite could do it is kind of that what that main theme feels like. And I'm on record as like Wind Waker is my favorite Zelda soundtrack, but I think like Yoko Kanno's Turn A Gundam nails the exact thing that some of that core Wind Waker music is going for better than that game could. And so all over the scope of the whole soundtrack, I think it captures the feel of the pastoral, the rural, the like local and low-key and folk music to the like big sweeping music that feels like it encompasses the whole scope of human history like Final Shore, to the like more strange and eclectic stuff that's very industrial to capture the industrial themes of the show, of like that contrast between the pastoral and the industrial, and then also more electronic or sort of strange music to represent the moon people, and all of that stuff blends together and moves together so beautifully. It, of course, has one of, we'll talk about this on our top 40s. It has one of the best Gundam songs of all time integrated as one of its main insert songs that also becomes an ending theme, which is Moon, or the Moon's Cocoon, Tsuki no Mayu, which plays at key points over the course of the show. That is just one of the best pieces of music written for Gundam. It's just, every time you listen to that song, you cannot help but be just bowled over. It's like the only song that I feel like when Hiroko Moriguchi just did her Gundam song covers project, of which we have 3 albums, she did Moon, and she basically didn't change anything. Because it's like,
Yep.
what do you change? It's like, you can't change anything about that song. You can't reorchestrate it. It's a perfect piece of music. Nothing about it can be altered other than to alter it to make it worse. And it's like, there's like a testament to how good a song is. Like, that is it, that you had Hiroko Moriguchi, who is like, did these incredible covers of all these songs and worked with amazing musicians across the whole Japanese music industry to create these incredible arrangements of classic Gundam music. And they looked at Moon and they're like, I don't know, like, can you do the cool island singing thing that the singer does on the track? It's like, yeah, I can do that. It's like, well, then let's just do it. Like, let's just do a straightforward cover of Moon, because that's the only thing you could really do with that song. And then you have like what might be I would say my other favorite track would be Moon. Obviously, is like the big famous track from the soundtrack. Then the other one would be Days, the one I linked to you, which is a much more low-key piece of music. It's not a very flashy piece of music, but I think it's the one that to me captures the themes of the show so perfectly, which is that contrast between the pastoral and the industrial, and the way that like they destroy each other. Because the piece of music is very simple. It starts with a very simple piano melody that then transitions into acoustic guitar melody. And this is one where like, I just think there's like some simple acoustic guitar stuff that's done in the song that I think is really beautiful. And the melody is a very simple call and response. It's bum 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 bum. And it's that melody repeated kind of over and over again, with more things being layered on top of it. But the thing that the acoustic guitarist does with the response part of the melody is that you're constantly getting to that note that is going to land on and is going to finish the response to the call, that brings a sense of finality to the musical tension, right? So part of the like call and response structure in music is that the call is a melodic structure that ends with like something missing, like you're not quite there and there's a tension built, and then the response resolves that tension. And it's a very standard musical composition technique that you hear in like basically every piece of music, that feeling of like tension and then satisfaction. But the thing about Days is that it never gives you the satisfaction. It always delays it, because when the acoustic guitarist plays the final note of the response theme, he slides up, or the guitarist slides the note up 1 fret and makes it sharp. So it goes ba da da bum ba da dum ba, and it slides up that one so it doesn't land on the note you want to be satisfied on. It sharpens it, and it does that the whole time. So you're constantly left in a slight state of tension while you're listening to this like very pleasant music that's very folksy. It's a little bit of piano, some drums, and an acoustic guitar, and then you get this weird electronic part that is these notes that just are like popping around you in weird like 3D space that's disorients you, while you're constantly having this satisfaction delayed. That 3D space is becoming more and more chaotic with all these weird electronic notes, and then eventually that whole melody just collapses and it becomes this very intense, aggressive piano piece with electronic backing that doesn't even really have a particularly melodic structure, and is just kind of attacking you and becomes faster and faster and faster in tempo until the whole like sort of thing disintegrates and it feels like the meaning is lost. And it's this one story told about this like desire to have peace, of like a simple life, to just live in this world, and wanting to be satisfied, and that satisfaction being taken from you, and it's just like a little bit off and a little bit off, and then everything is that like simple peaceful space is becoming more chaotic, more pulled away from you, until it is completely consumed by like the chaos and noise of like the city or modern life or whatever you'd want to like interpret it as. And to me, that's like so much what Turn A Gundam is about, is like this want for a simple pastoral life, and that always being slightly out of reach no matter what you're doing, and that like drama and that tension is part of what Turn A Gundam is about. And to me, Days is a very simple piece of music. It's not a complex composition in general. It doesn't have a lot going on. It doesn't have a bunch of instruments or anything. Like, you could get like 5 people together and reproduce that piece of music. You don't even have to be a particularly skilled musician. Like, I could play the acoustic guitar piece like nothing. I mean, I literally can play the acoustic guitar piece. But like the idea of how to structure that music to deliver that theme in just very simple, elegant ways is, to me, something that song is like the best example I have on that soundtrack of it. But it's something the whole soundtrack does, and it's why it's my favorite Gundam soundtrack, and one of my favorite soundtracks to anything ever.
Absolutely. And I'm glad I let you talk about that one more than me, because like I said, you talk about that soundtrack beautifully. Do you want to quickly recap what our top 10 were?
Yes.
My 10 was Gundam The Origin.
My number 10 was Mobile Suit Gundam 00.
My 9 was Gundam Build Fighters.
My number 9 was Mobile Suit Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans.
My number 8 was Reconquista in G.
My number 8 was Mobile Suit Gundam Seed.
My number 7 was Victory Gundam.
My number 7 was Gundam Build Fighters.
My number 6 was Mobile Fighter G Gundam.
My number 6 was Mobile Suit Gundam Thunderbolt.
My number 5 was Zeta Gundam.
My number 5 was Mobile Suit Gundam Hathaway's Flash.
My number 4 was Gundam Thunderbolt.
My number 4 was Mobile Suit Gundam.
My number 3 was Turn A Gundam.
My number 3 was Mobile Suit Zeta Gundam.
My number 2 was Hathaway's Flash.
My number 2 was Mobile Fighter G Gundam.
My number 1 was Mobile Suit Gundam.
And my number 1 was Turn A Gundam called Turn A Gundam.
This is the exact same thing that happened on the overall
Yes.
shows list. We had the same top 6. It was
Yes.
the same 10 on the overall shows list. We just had them in a different order. We're very in sync on this, clearly. Yeah, same top 6. Gundam has good music.
Yeah, and it was that thing that I liked, that we both were like, when we were heading into the top 6, we're like, and the top 6 is the like pantheon of Gundam music. That's like the top. And then when we said that, I don't think we either of us realized, oh, we have identical top 6s, just all in completely different orders.
Very funny. Okay, Sean. That was a lot of talk about soundtracks, but we're not done.
Oh no.
Oh no. We're doing songs. So let's set the ground rules here. First up is we made our top 10 year 3 songs, which is our top 10 songs from the season 3 shows, which we ranked last week. Now is the best songs. Jesus Christ, there were a lot of good songs this year.
Oh yeah. There were as every time we've done this, there's a frightening number of songs. I'm like, when we were watching the show, I was like, well, this song will definitely be when we eventually do a top 10. And then I'm very naive, because this happened 3 times at this point. And I sit down and actually to go to make the list, I'm like, oh fuck, like half these songs, I've got like 20 songs that I thought would certainly be on a top 10. And that's not how numbers work.
Same thing here. This was, I think, the hardest maybe of any of the 3 years to just narrow down to 10, because we definitely had more songs than any other year we've done. We had I feel like we had 100 for this year alone. It was just a ton of songs. A lot of shows, it's because we had a couple of shows with a full complement of 8, so there were just so many here, so many different ones. And I will say, all of my top 10 are in my top 40. That's how good the songs this year were.
Me too, and I think there might be 2 songs from this year that are also in my top 40 that are not in this top 10, because obviously that would be 12 songs.
Yeah.
So
wow.
There's definitely at least one. I think there's 2 from this year that are in my top 10 that are not, or in my top 40 that aren't in this top 10.
Yeah. So Sean, I'll let you do the honors. Kick us off. What was your 10 best song from the shows watched in Weekly Suit Gundam Season 3?
Yeah. So there were a lot of songs that were vying for this spot for number 10. But I'm pretty happy with this one. A song that I've listened to for a long time, but didn't realize that it was a Gundam song. And that's Hatena by Penguin Research. It is the second opening theme to Build Divers Re-Rise. So it's a very recent one for us. And yeah, this is a song that I have had on a playlist for 3 or 4 years. Ever since, I guess, around the time when the show would have come out, not realizing that it was from a Gundam show, because I just heard the song, liked it, and put it on a playlist. And then we watched Build Divers Re-Rise, and I was like, holy shit, this is where the song's from. An experience I don't think I've ever had with another anime, other than me mistaking Blazing, the original opening theme for Turn A Gundam, as a Sword Art Online song, but that's a slightly different issue. So Hatena is the Penguin Research song, one of the best band names ever. Just I have to start off with that. And one of the things I love about the song, we talked about it a lot on that episode, is just particularly for the Build franchise, it is such a different style of song. It is so aggressive and so insular in its aggression. It's the song that Hatena means question mark, and it's just the singer constantly berating themselves and just stabbing themselves with these questions about what is my life, what have I been doing, where am I going, how. I think one of my favorite lines is one in the chorus, which is how have I lived up to this point, and how will I go on living, which when written in Japanese is very kind of poetic in the way it conjugates the verbs. But it's this song that's just surprising, every time I hear it, with how aggressive it is. It kind of reminds me of some of the stuff in Double O, the backhorn songs like Wanna. It's got a certain punk vibe to it, but a little bit more modern than the backhorn stuff. And it's one thing that it just stands out for me so much amongst the songs we listened to this year. There are a couple of opening themes on Iron-Blooded Orphans that are in a similar style, but I think Hatena, of the more hardcore J-rock songs, Hatena really stood out to me, and it's a song I've listened to and loved for a really long time, and I was very pleased to learn that it was a Gundam song after the fact.
Great song, not in my top 10 or my top 40. I do love it. It's great, and I'm glad it's on yours. Particularly just any episode of anime that starts with those first 10 seconds of this song.
Yes. Yeah, it's just immediately you're you're in for a killer. It's great.
Abso-fucking-lutely. My number 10 is Tracer from Mobile Suit Gundam Hathaway, the insert song by Hiroyuki Sawano with lyrics by Benjamin, the song that tells us about our terra firma, our Earth. This is the big Hiroyuki Sawano insert song moment, which you have in everything he's ever done. You have it all through Attack on Titan, and you have it in Unicorn, and you have it in all these different things, and it's very much a vocal song. This could fit on one of his vocal albums. And it's used in a slightly more subdued moment in Hathaway, in that it is a moment where you're in the cockpit of the mobile suits, but it's not when they're starting to fire and everything. It's in the build up to the big action sequence in the middle of the movie. And I think that is such a unique usage of this kind of song. And this song itself is fairly unique. It is not my favorite song Sawano has written for Gundam. There's some others in my top 40. But I absolutely love it. I listen to it a lot. The big 3 from Hathaway that you had of Mobius, Tracer, and then Senko, Flash. All 3 of those I listen to all the time. Flash, the ending song, just missed my top 10, but I do love that song as well. And Tracer is just always a joy. It's such a well-mixed song. It's so big. I love how it goes from sort of the small lyrics about this honestly kind of weirdly inspirational music about becoming your best self, to this just big bombastic action piece, which is where you get the like big images like in the cockpit of the mobile suit as we're flying through space, which is one of my favorite images from anything this year. Not flying through space, flying through the space of the city and like seeing it from that aerial view. Really incredible stuff. One of my favorite songs. Love it to death.
Yeah, Tracer did not quite make the cut for me. I think I have another song from Hathaway on here that I think I kind of like was comfortable saying this takes the Hathaway song spot.
Yeah.
But I also love Tracer to death. Yeah. All right. So my number 9 from Iron-Blooded Orphans, the original ending to Iron-Blooded Orphans by Misia. It's Orphans no Namida, or Orphans Tears. This song is so unique. It sounds completely unlike any other ending theme to Gundam. It's like somewhere it's like in like a halfway point between something like Human Touch or Magic, and like a more sort of traditional kind of like J-pop, like somber J-pop song. You know, it's got that very soulful, almost kind of not exactly jazzy kind of quality to it. But it's one of those songs that whenever you watch an episode of Iron-Blooded Orphans and it starts coming in at the end of the episode and you get that like electronic organ that comes in, which an electronic organ is always just a fucking awesome instrument to hear. Like you start getting that, and then the singer comes in with that ooh, and like comes in with that sort of like setting you up, and then it smashes to the actual ending, and you get the singer just belting out Orphans Namida and going into the whole thing. It's just such a powerful song that captures the mood of Iron-Blooded Orphans just absolutely on point. It's a song I've listened to just like constantly since I watched the show. It's a song I've actually I learned and kind of put together an acoustic guitar version of it because I like the song so much, and it's very simple. It's like very simple chords and stuff, so it's very easy to learn to play on an instrument. Very easy to sing. So yeah, it's Orphans no Namida, or the Tears of an Orphan. Just all-time great, I think, ending Gundam theme, and my number 9.
Yeah, I love it. It did not quite make my list. There are Iron-Blooded Orphans there are 8 major openings, endings, and then there's an insert or 2. There's so much. I like consciously narrowed it down to 2, one opening and one ending, and you'll see what those are in a little bit. Orphans no Namida was one of the hardest cuts for me. Also didn't quite make my top 40, but you know I love it. You know, the later statement that Orphans Sorae, like it's so singable, it's so hummable, it's such a cool song. I'm glad it's on yours because I love it. My sort of unique ending that came in at my number 9 was Magic Time from Re-Rise, Build Divers Re-Rise, which, God, just when it builds up to that main swell of it's magic time, kimi no kai. God, it is such a sexy, awesome, fun song. And the entire ending, the entire theme. I think the ending animation it goes with in the show just is such a great little story about that character and sort of growing up with Kuga Hiroto as her friend and all of that stuff. Man, Magic Time is just a straight fucking banger, and I sang its praises on that Re-Rise episode, but it definitely, I saved it a spot in my top 10. Like you, I saved more than 10 songs a spot in my top 10, which was a problem, but I did wound up getting it in there at number 9. I adore it.
Yeah, Magic Time was a really hard cut for me. Like I love the Spice Girls nature of that song so much. It's so weird. Like it's just like such an off-ball choice. But that's like always one of those things that when you watch a lot of anime, and at this point we have watched a shit ton of anime on Weekly Suit Gundam, it's like you're like really looking for that theme that breaks the mold and does something interesting. And Magic Time is definitely a good example of that, and didn't quite make my list. All right, so then my number 8, this was a surprising one for me, but when I was listening to the songs, I was like, no, this has to be on here, is Carry On, the insert song from GM's Counterattack, by Back On, the house band, basically, of Build Fighters. Most of the openings for that series was done by Back On. So this is the song that plays when Reiji comes in a triumphant moment in the 3rd act of the GM's Counterattack OVA. And it's a song that it was, for whatever reason, when we originally watched it, I think we talked about this on the podcast, I just like, I have a playlist that's like, I have a couple playlists that are like my anime song playlists, and for whatever reason, I just missed this one. I didn't put it on that playlist and had not heard it in years. And so then when we watched the GM's Counterattack for the podcast, I heard that song. I'm like, oh my God, this song is so good. where did this come from? It's like, how do I not remember the song? And I checked my playlist, it wasn't on there, and added it. And I've listened to the song a lot since we did that podcast earlier this year. And I love it so much. It's got that back on energy, the sort of push and pull between J-rock and rap that I adore. But in this song, the rapper in the band is doing a reggae thing when it gets to his verse, which is fucking sick and very weird and different. But the main thing I love about Carry On is I just think it like communicates the main emotions of that moment of, you've been waiting for Reiji to come back in. You've been missing him since the end of Gundam Build Fighters. You watched this very middling show, Build Fighters Try, that teased Iori all the time but didn't do anything with him. And then now finally you get this character back. And so the fact that you just get this like anthem over the course of the song, this kind of chant that repeats over and over again, which is, we're back, it's time to fly again. We're back, it's time to fly. We're back, it's time to fly again. Is amazing. And then the structure of the verses is, it's a back and forth between English and Japanese that I really love. So like the first verse starts, we never stop, here we go. You ready, mo ichido, makeni dare ni mo, no way. The sun rises every day, matsuyo akemae, so on and so forth. So like the lines either start with one language and end with another, and that continues through the rap section also. And then when you get to the chorus, what they do with the chorus is they have Japanese lines and English lines like trading off between each other, but between the two singers. So the J-rock style singer sings out Japanese lines, and then basically before that Japanese line finishes ending, the rap singer comes in with an English line that then takes over, and then before that English line finishes, the Japanese singer comes back in with the J-rock style. And so it trades off, sort of like a baton passing between the two singers over the course of the ending. And it's just got this incredible energy to it that to me communicates so much, this partnership between these two people, that where they're like, we're back, we're here to fuck shit up. And it's about these two people together making the song together, passing it between the two, like almost like a dance. And it's just, it's got this incredible fucking energy to it that I love to death. So it was a surprise to me of like, when I sat down to make the list, how strong I felt about it. Of like, because I knew there would at least be 2 Build Fighter songs on the list, because there's another Build Fighter song, because there's so many Build Fighter songs I loved. And when I was boiling it down, I was like, this has got to be the other one. It's Carry On.
Yeah, it's really good. The only way I could make this fucking brutal task of a list work, Sean, was to say, you get one back on song, and it's going to stand for all of them, and that's what I did. So Carry On, not on my list, but I adore it. It's everything you just said. I second. It's fantastic. I love all the back on songs for Build Fighters. Yes. And I wound up picking one because I felt like if I brought in more than one, I would just invite them all, and then that would be a problem. So there you go. My number 8 is Asue to Tomorrow from Mobile Suit Gundam Age, the opening from Gundam Age. Couple of Gundam Age songs that almost made the cut, including the second ending, My World, which is just such an amazing song and ending. But I ultimately went with Asue because I think it is the most unique of the Gundam Age songs, and the one that just, you hear 5 seconds of it and that's the Mobile Suit Gundam Age song, you know? That's the song that like gives you hope for that show in the early episodes when the show hasn't really played its hand yet. It is, I love the quality of the vocals. I love the overall rhythm of the thing. I love the way it like deceptively like simple and kind of like quiet, and it just gets big and gets under your skin and really moves and inspires you. It represents a lot of what I love about Gundam Age, and was one I was always holding a spot for, because it's just one of the most kind of singular Gundam openings.
That is one that is a little bit higher up on my list, so we finally have some crossover.
Good. What's your number 8?
I already did my number 8. You can
Never
do my
mind.
number 7.
Do your number 7.
My number 7 is the opening theme to Mobile Suit Gundam Hathaway's Flash. It is Mobius, the most James Bond-ass Gundam song ever written by Hiroyuki Sawano, MPI, Lako, and Benjamin, all credited on this one. So you have like a whole suite of the singers for the Hathaway movie on this. and it's just such a fucking good song. It's so addictive. It's a song I just like to I could just listen to on a loop over and over and over again. It's so cool. It's so sexy. When Benjamin says the word Mobius at like the beginning of the song, it's like so perfectly dialed in as like it's the title drop, and it comes in at like the beginning, and it's just like he lends it just that an extra amount of like emphasis and weight for you to be like, that's the title drop, but not so much that it feels like you're showing off the title drop. It's like the whole song is so cool about how it handles its shit. It's like, I don't think I have like a bunch of like really insightful things to say about why I love this song. I just think it's super fucking good and cool and sexy, and I like listening to it. And like the animation and everything at the beginning of the movie also is really awesome, and like it just gets you in the mood for everything that Hathaway has to offer right at the top. So this was like the one Hathaway song, because I was definitely struggling with Tracer, and when I was looking at this, like how am I going to make this list? And I was like, I'm going to just pick one Hathaway song, because I like Tracer so much also, and for me Mobius slightly edged it out, so I'm like, I'm going to give Mobius the spot on this list because it's really good.
Mobius is higher on my list. I will just say it's a James Bond song that is maybe better than any actual James Bond song. It's that good.
I don't feel like I'm in this position to say that because I haven't seen most of the James Bond movies. I've only seen a few, but of the ones I've seen, this easily is my favorite of the James Bond style themes.
Indeed.
It's so good.
Particularly, it's a modern James Bond theme. It's like the kind of thing you'd get in the Daniel Craig era, and Daniel Craig era mostly had really good songs, except for the fourth movie, Spectre. This is, I think, better than any of them. It's so good. All right, that was your number 7. My number 7 is Divers High, the opening to Mobile Suit Gundam, or Gundam Build Divers. Build Divers, terrible show. That two good things it gave us: Re-Rise eventually. You had to wait for that one, though. The other good thing is Divers High, which I love that march quality of the opening. Yep. I love that it's a rap, sort of song that then builds into this big, like, sung chorus. I love the edit they do for the TV size version, the 90-second version, where they specifically bring in the final instance of the chorus from the full 5-minute version, where a lot of the instrumentation drops out around the singer for that final one, and so you get like those pure like high vocals when they go up an octave. It's so good. It's such a unique song. I even love the animation that goes along with it. Like there's a really fun part in the middle where they're doing sort of the rap part, and they have like time to the music, all the characters kind of coming up. There's one part in particular where I don't remember any of their names because it's a terrible show, but the cat girl comes up and like does the nya with her like hands times to the beat of the music, and I'm like, oh, that character's gonna be awesome. I don't remember her name, so that didn't work. But the theme song emphatically
Momo. Her name is Momo. I just remembered it.
Okay, theme song emphatically better than the show. One of my favorite Gundam themes. So unique, had to be on here. I fucking love it.
Yeah, I really like Divers High a lot. It didn't quite make the list for me, but I do think it's a very good example of the same thing we talked about with Magic Time. That like it's just amongst a sea of very samey anime openings, Divers High just stands out so much.
Yes.
It's a song I really like a lot. It just didn't quite make the cut for me, but I'm glad it's on your list.
And I was, Build Divers, we hate it. I was glad to like give it one like place of like honor, because it does. This is one thing it does emphatically very well.
It's very true. All right, my number 6, the fourth ending theme for Mobile Suit Gundam: The Origin is Sora no Kanata by Hideko Moriguchi, our big rock anthem of Gundam: The Origin. This is a song I've loved for a really long time. It is one where when eventually we get to the top 40, I have both this song and Eternal Wind on there, but I have this higher than Eternal Wind because there's something about me of like what Hideko Moriguchi does and kind of coming back to the Gundam rock anthem genre of music, I guess, after F91, is I think that Sora no Kanata is like a really well-balanced song. Like, I think rock anthems have this problem sometimes of being a bit too long in the build-up without having enough variety and variation in how that build-up is constructed. And I think that's a problem I have a little bit with Eternal Wind, which is a song I do really like a lot, but I think is improved a lot when she the recomposition she does and the rearrangement on the Gundam Song Covers album. And I think Sora no Kanata I think takes some of the lessons learned from Eternal Wind and stuff and brings it forward. There's a thing it does in the verses, to kind of give a specific example of what I mean, where the backing instrumental in the verse, particularly early in the song, is very simplistic. It's some drums, it's a piano, and it's an electric guitar, and then it's Hiroko Moriguchi singing the vocals, right? So they give a lot of space for Hiroko Moriguchi to sing and for her voice to occupy in the track, which is good because her voice is fucking incredible, and it's only even gotten better with age. And so they give her so much of that space. But behind that, what the instruments are doing is very interesting because they're all working on very different rhythms. Particularly the piano is doing a very classic rock anthem thing where it's only coming in on its chords on the very big notes. So I think it comes in at like 1, 3, and 4. If it's 4/4 song. And it's like, that is fine. Like, that's how rock anthems usually are. And like, that works fine. What the electric guitar is doing, though, is it's very distorted, and they're playing power chords, and the power chords come in on a syncopated rhythm. So the power chords are like a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and 4 and 1 and a 2 and a 3 and 4 and that spices up the whole verse so much, having the push and pull between the sort of classic rock anthem style, very straightforward piano with this much funkier electric guitar backing, and the push and pull between them. And then especially at the end of the verse, or at like the end of like a cycle of like, once it's done it 1, 2, 3, 4 times, on the 4th time it goes through that pattern, the piano comes in, and it doesn't go into the syncopated rhythm, but it occupies the rest of the space that the syncopated rhythm leaves open, because the syncopated rhythm plays at different points in time than the classic rhythm. And so the piano at the 4th iteration in the verse, instead of just being on 1, 3, and 4, it's occupying all the sonic space with this counter melody that the rock guitars or the power chords are not playing. And it's like just this really nice spice throughout that whole song that keeps the buildup in the early section really interesting and dynamic, and it's very exciting to listen to and sort of engage with the rhythm, because then of course Moriguchi is singing and like on top of all of that. And then of course you get the classic rock anthem stuff at the midpoint of the song where it all goes big and huge and epic and like swells and everything, and then, you know, that's where her voice just like totally goes into overdrive. And so for me, it is like a premier rock anthem song that just happens also to be a premier rock anthem Gundam song. So that is why it is number 6 on my list. It's a song I like to listen to and try to break down exactly what it's doing a lot, because I think it's just musically very interesting in what is a very kind of like tried and true genre that you've heard a lot of.
Love this song. It was just outside of my top 10 for this.
Wow.
It's great.
I did not expect that. I thought this would be in your top 10 here.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah. No, you like this one more than me. I like this one a lot. I like Moriguchi's other songs for Gundam more. But I do love this one. There's a lot of songs, Sean.
That's true.
My number 6 is Raise Your Flag, the first opening to Iron-Blooded Orphans. And here's the thing. I think purely like in the wash, I think Rage of Dust, the third Iron-Blooded Orphans, is even more to my liking as a song, as a piece of music. But there's just no denying what a perfect opener Raise Your Flag is for Mobile Suit Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans, for that show. What an absolutely electric feeling it is when you hear those strings come in at the beginning, and then the TV edit is so good where it just goes right into Raise Your Flag, right as the like boot like comes down in the water on the blood basically in that opening, and then kick into that opening animation. It is such a bold statement of what this show is going to be. It is such a perfect anthem for these characters, for particularly that first season of IBO, but for the whole thing. You know, and I listen to it all the time. Like I said, maybe Rage of Dust is even more to my liking, but Raise Your Flag is the one that just brings this show to life in my memory when I hear it, and that's why it's the opening from Iron-Blooded Orphans I chose, and why it is here. It kicks an unholy amount of ass.
Yeah, this is if I had a number 11, this is my number 11, because it did not quite make the list.
Wow.
And I actually have to say, there is no opening theme from Iron-Blooded Orphans on my list, which was like the hardest thing to cut. Because I have 2 ending themes from IBO, so IBO is well represented, because I do like Orphans of Namida, and one other song that is probably very obvious more. But if I had to pick an opening, this would be the one, and it might be somewhere on my top 40. You might see. But yes, that was the hardest cut easily for me, was not having Raise Your Flag on there.
I love this song so much that even though I think there's a lyric in the chorus that is kind of stupid, which is Raise Your Flag, so just raise your flag, is kind of a dumb lyric, and it's still awesome because the song is so awesome.
It is a very awesome song. It's so energetic, you know.
Yes.
Man with a Mission, which is the band that does that, has done a couple of really good songs, like the Seven Deadly Sins song. I think they did one of the openings for Vinland Saga. That's really good. They're just a really good band. Yeah. All right, so that's now on to my number 5. So my number 5 is a song you talked about briefly, Jonathan, which is Asue, or For Tomorrow, the original opening theme for Gundam Age by Galileo Galilei, probably best known to the anime community, as also they did the opening theme to Anohana, which is called Ao Shiori.
I mean, he also discovered gravity. I think we're all pretty, we know that, right?
Yes, Galileo Galilei, famous for discovering gravity.
Wait,
he was definitely the dude who had an apple dropped on his head and he discovered the gravity. That was Galileo.
Oh God, if this were the kind of podcast where we had an outside editor and producer, I'd be going, cut this, but it's me and I'm not going to want to cut this, so we can just leave that my absolute failure of a joke in. Galileo did not discover gravity. I know that. It was Isaac Asimov.
Yes, it was Isaac Asimov in the 3 laws of robotics, and the third one was let there be gravity. That's what he said. So Asue by Galileo Galilei, this is the song they created when they took a feather and a bowling ball up to the top of a tower and dropped them at the same time. It was like, it's the same thing, which is the thing that Galileo didn't actually do, but people say that he did. Because obviously they wouldn't actually hit at the same time because of air resistance. Anyways, this song kicks all kinds of ass. You talked about it a little bit. One thing I want to talk about with Asue, for people who maybe have not done a deep dive on the lyrics, because obviously if you don't speak Japanese, you'd have to look up a translation. But the lyrics to this song, I think, are so interesting because it's almost like the anti Build Fighter song. It's like the anti Back On, where it seems like it, like if you do like a cursory pass of the lyrics, they seem like they're like super optimistic and positive, right? Like the title of the song, Asue, which would be like to tomorrow, towards tomorrow, something like that, sounds like this is like your optimistic shonen song, and it's got a bunch of lyrics that kind of seem like that, but if you really break it down, it's a lot more complicated than that. Like for instance, the main chorus, which is Shinkasuru hibi shinkasuru uta wa aseru 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 aseru, so on and so forth. The full lyrics then go on to say sabi nai yoni owari no nai asue 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 mo hashitteru. And what that means is Shinkasuru hibi is like evolving days. This evolving song runs as if it won't rust. These endless days, tomorrow. It's already running, or I'm already running, and then it evolves that structure. But it's basically, the song is about someone who wants to be the shonen protagonist person. They want to be someone who's just like, I'm just pushing towards tomorrow and like towards the future and hopeful and all of that, but they can't quite be that person. And that's why the song is really high for me, is because I think it was something I didn't notice until we rewatched the show. Because obviously you don't know what Flit's character arc is going to be. But it's very much exactly Flit. Like, it feels like it was a very conscious choice. Because Flit is that. He is this person who wants to be a hero. He wants to be the shonen protagonist boy with hope and optimism in his heart, and who never fails and never looks back twice and all that kind of stuff. But he is not that person. He is the person who hurts and has failed, and he's filled with hate and anger and doesn't know how to move past it. He's not optimistic. He's cynical by nature. And that's like very much what the song actually communicates. And you feel that, I think, in the tonality of the song. The song has this wistful kind of bittersweet tone to it that is very much like this main singer for Galileo Galilei has that quality. It's very true of the opening theme to Anohana. And there's something about that, this like really nice frictious contrast between a lot of imagery that on the surface of it, of like metaphors of like the sun peeking through clouds and stuff like that, that seems like a shonen thing, but it describes the sun peeking through these clouds, pouring freezing rain, and the light from that sun like piercing a like burning wound into your heart, because it's like you kind of know that it's not real. There's a line near the end that says, Yume kana wanu koto no utsukushisa wo bokura wa shirazu ni itai yo, which means we want to remain ignorant of the beauty of dreams that go unfulfilled, which is such an interesting dark line. Like, we don't want to like look at what does it like, that dreams that go unfulfilled and that there's something beautiful about that. You want to just believe that your dreams are going to be fulfilled and that that's the optimistic future, but in reality that's not what happens, and there's something sort of tragically beautiful about those dreams that never go fulfilled. It's full of really interesting lyrics like that. So it's like, it's on top of it just being musically really compelling. I do want to encourage people to go back and like really read the lyrics. There are good translations online and kind of break down some of what it's saying, because it's a song that when you listen to it through that lens, it opens up a lot more. And so that's why it's number 5 on my list.
Absolutely. That's a great reading of that song, and I agree with that. It's a beautiful song that's also weirdly haunting. It's big, inspiring, and it's got something haunting about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, my number 5, it's a song that just kicks an unholy amount of ass, and that is Nibun no Ich, the opening to Gundam Build Fighters, the definitive back-on Gundam Build Fighters song. And again, I love a lot of the back-on songs. I considered putting Cerulean here, the opening to Build Fighters Try, because I really do love Cerulean. I listen to that song all the time. I think that is a phenomenal opening song. The thing Nibun no Ich has to it is, I think, 2 things. One, the lyrics are just so on point to what that show is. They're simple, but they just say so much. And there's something about watching an episode of Build Fighters and hearing that, these lyrics about I'm not alone, we're together, all of that it's like very, very common anime themes that Build Fighters is uncommonly good at making feel fresh and real, and this song embodies. And then I think this song it starts great, and then it has a build to it. Then when you get to the full statement of the chorus, there's something about listening to this song that feels like you're just flying. I don't know how else to say it. It just sweeps you off your feet. And I never, every time I listen to this song, chills are sent down my spine when you get to that full statement of the chorus. Every single fucking time. And there's very few songs that can do that.
It is on my list. It's maybe somewhat higher on my list.
Yeah, it's so good.
Very good. It's very, very good. My number 4 is the 6th ending theme to Mobile Suit Gundam: The Origin by Masayoshi Yamazaki, Hasen no Namida, the most like 70s rock ass Vietnam era song you could get that is not legitimately just a song for that era like the Daisuke Inoue songs. This is very much the like, I play the guitar song on this list of the core guitar lick, the bum 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 ba da 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 dum bum ba da bum ba da da ba dum. It's so good. It is just a perfect fucking guitar lick. It's so good. It can stand up next to any of the great guitar licks of the time, like Sunshine of Your Life. It is just very simple. It is construction, but it's just perfect. Because that song isn't hugely complicated. It doesn't it's not like it moves very far from that guitar lick at any given point, but it shouldn't. The guitar lick's so good, it's like, if you're getting too far away from the guitar lick, you're fucking up. The guitar lick is the spine of that whole fucking song, and it is a powerful, strong spine. Because this is another one of those songs that I could just listen to on loop forever, because it captures, it's music bubblegum or like music popcorn or something. It's just like, give it to me forever. I could just listen to that guitar lyric and that guitar lick for all time. I don't have like a super sophisticated, complex read of the lyrics or anything like that. It is purely guitar licks sound good. Me like number 4, Hasen no Namida.
Yes, in English that's line dotted tears, and it is phenomenal. Missed my top 10. I was sure it would be on there. It was what I had been reserving a spot for 3 years. And then it turns out we had a fucking 7-car pileup on the highway of great Gundam songs this year. And so it just missed out. I'm glad it's on yours. Indeed, that guitar lick is the fucking best. My number 4 is also from Mobile Suit Gundam: The Origin. And this is one I actually had to text you about to figure out if it was even eligible for the list.
Yeah.
Because this is Don't Say Goodbye. This is from episode 5. This is the song that Crowley Hamon sings in the best scene of The Origin, one of the best scenes in all of Gundam. And it's weird because it's not an insert song. It's not an opening or ending. It's just it's a diegetic musical number inside the show. And I wasn't sure if it even qualified. And because of that, it's also just very hard to rank, because it's not a song I listen to on its own all that much, because it is so devastating, and it is intentionally, it is a very slow ballad that is just piano and vocals. and it is so much on the strength of that of the vocalist's musical talents. Which, what an amazing singer she is. I'm forgetting her name at the moment. I'm sorry, but it is a masterpiece of a song. But it is not one that I can just like listen to over and over and over again, like Nibun no Ich or something like that, right? And it is so tied to that moment in the show, unlike these other songs, which are tied to opening animations or ending animations or things like that. So it wound up at number 4. It could have been anywhere else. But, we spent like a solid half hour devouring this scene on that episode of The Origin, so part 5. So look to that conversation for why it is this high. But man, if it qualifies for this list, it must be high because it is amazing.
Yeah, I this didn't quite make my list because I think partially for like it's a little bit hard to rank. It's similar to that, like we talked about the Thunderbolt songs, that those are technically eligible because it just seems like weird to like hard exclude them because they are lyrical songs and everything. But it is that thing where it's like I don't really listen to Don't Say Goodbye outside of the context of The Origin, which is not to say that it's a bad song, but it's like a hard thing for me to rank. So I didn't quite make my list. It was very close to making it onto my top 40, but I didn't quite put it there either. That would maybe be like if I had a 41. It was one of the songs that was kept on swapping place with number 40 on my overall 40 list.
Yeah. Well, it's on mine, and I'm glad it's there, because, man, what an all-time great musical moment in the history of Gundam, and just anime in general. That's my number 4.
All right, my number 3, a real fucking tearjerker of a goddamn song. The final ending theme to Iron-Blooded Orphans is Phrygia by Uru. This is the song that, like, when I was breaking down the lyrics when we were talking about Iron-Blooded Orphans, I almost just broke into tears on the podcast. It's the closest I've ever been to actually, like, crying on the podcast. Because there's something about the lyrics of the song, the simple nature of the title Phrygia, which means in flower words, or hanakotoba in Japanese, means innocence and purity, and that reflecting things about the characters and the scope of the show. Phrygia is that kind of like, to me, like iconic style anime ending that is very emotional. It's a slow piano ballad that just like kind of sums up all the intensity of the emotions you feel at that point, right? Because this is the last 12 episodes of Iron-Blooded Orphans. And so it kind of going from the very much more kind of like stylish and big songs, like something like Orphans no Namida at the very beginning, it kind of turning into this very somber, solitary piano ballad by the end is very appropriate. And it's just a song that is very haunting. It's like a song that's hard to listen to sometimes outside the context of the show because I think it makes you very emotional. It was one that I remember, Jonathan, when we watched it, you talked about that after we finished watching Iron-Blooded Orphans, you listened to the song a lot afterwards because it helped, like, you kind of need to hear it to kind of process some of what the show is doing, which is something I didn't do on my rewatch of it because I'd already seen it. But when I originally watched it, that was definitely my experience, and it's just been a song that's been with me for years at this point. And there's just something about its message of hope, but hope for like a future that you're not necessarily going to be a part of, and this kind of like destroyed or tarnished innocence that must be left behind, and hopefully you can hand that off to a new generation. But when in the beginning of the chorus, when the singer comes in and says the line Kibo no Hana, which means the flower of hope, like it just hits you in the gut every single time. It's one of my all-time favorite Gundam endings, so my number 3 is Phrygia.
Believe it or not, it's higher on my list. And for all the reasons you said and more, we'll talk about it in a second. My number 3 was lower on your list. It's Mobius from Mobile Suit Gundam Hathaway's Flash. I think we said our piece on it. It is the most fucking kick-ass James Bond song ever written, including for an actual James Bond theme or movie. Just such a great opening for a essentially spy thriller, which is what Hathaway kind of is. Honestly, my only complaint about Hathaway as a movie is I wish more of this song were in it, because the song has such an incredible build. I wish they'd actually done the full, like, 3-minute James Bond style opening and gotten to go through that whole build, because that's one of my favorite things in a James Bond movie. Like, say, take Skyfall or something, where you get to start with the slower part and then build all the way up to Adele, belting at full range, right? And that's when you get the visuals are, like, really going into overdrive. I wish they kind of only do the first minute of the song in the movie, and the whole build of it is such an incredible thing to behold. This song always takes my breath away. Easy number 3 for me. That's fucking great.
Yeah, absolutely amazing song. My number 2 from Reconquista in G by Hasegawa Daisuke. It is G no Senko, or the G Flash, Flash of G, however you want to translate that song. This song fucking is just amazing. It is like the most bright, hopeful song you have ever heard in your entire goddamn life. Hasegawa Daisuke is a singer that I've heard on quite a few anime at this point, particularly the third opening theme to JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 4, Diamond is Unbreakable. He sings a song called Great Days that has this similar, like, really bright, like almost intensely bright quality to his vocals. And it's just something where Hasegawa Daisuke has such a distinctive voice that if you hear him in any song, you know immediately, oh, it's that guy. It's the JoJo guy. It's the G-Reco guy. No other male vocalist I've ever heard can capture quite that sort of bright, hopeful, like energetic quality that his voice has. And the song like deploys it to like perfection. You know, when you get to that like all-time great chorus line where it has the lyrics of, Genki no ji wa hajimari no ji no reconquista. And when he does the thing that like I can't do because my voice can't go high enough, but when his voice rises on that Genki no ji wa, and it rises up on that wa, like basically an octave, it's like, holy shit. It's like every time I hear it, I'm like, that's why you get this dude. Because it's like that guy could fucking sing the shit out of that. And the kind of vibrato in his voice he brings to that, it's so good. It's just like absolutely sumptuous what he's able to do with his voice. But then on top of that, just like the whole construction of the song I adore to death. One of my favorite lyrics in any Gundam song is always going to be the G of Genki is the G of Hajimari. It is the G of Reconquista. We did the breakdown on the G-Reco episode of how crazy it is to associate the English letter G with the Japanese character G, which you would normally like Romanize as J-I, but it's in Hajimari, and it's the G of Reconquista, but Reconquista isn't a real word because it's Reconquista. They replace the C with a G, and it's like, it's this kind of like a crazy web of meaning and sort of like fractured nonsense. But it's so playful, and playful is maybe like the best word for how the whole song feels, is that it's just playful top to bottom. With its message, with its lyrics, with its music and the composition and the singing style from Hasegawa Daisuke. Like, it's just, this song is having so much fun. It is a song you cannot help but listen to with a massive smile on your face, because you're grabbing your pride, you are grabbing success, because the G of Genki is the G of Hajimari, and it is the G of Reconquista.
I genuinely don't know what your number... No, yes, I do. I just figured out your number 1.
Yes,
Never mind. For a second, I was lost.
My number 1 is maybe obvious because it maybe even has the number 1 in it. Who knows?
Yeah. Okay. My number 1 in a second. My number 2 is Frisia, the Iron-Blooded Orphans ending that you just talked about. It's gorgeous. It's perfect. I think one of the things... And I listened to this song the other day, making this list, and I always knew it was going to be high. But I listened to it just specifically looking at the lyrics in Japanese and just reading the words. And I think this song, Japanese is a language that has, fairly short words and direct, and it's very syllabic, right? So it's all these specific syllables, and there's a very kind of staccato quality to the language. And Frisia is a song that uses the kind of stripped down quality of Japanese as a language like a fucking knife, And there's, you talked about the lyric, the Kibo no Hana, like the way she comes into those words, the Kibo no Hana, like that alone is just a fucking weaponized use of simple, direct, short words to break your heart or to lift you up, because I think this song is alternately devastating and blindingly hopeful, which is how I would describe the ending of Iron-Blooded Orphans, which is the thing in Gundam with the highest body count, and also weirdly one of the most hopeful visions of living in an imperfect world that Gundam has ever provided. And that is the kind of dichotomy Frisia lives on. I would agree with what you said about among like the genre of anime ending we're all very familiar with, of the sad piano ballad. Frisia is the best version of that in a fucking walk that I've ever heard, and is unique among Gundam themes and anime endings. And the way it is used in those closing episodes of the show, the moment I specifically think of being Orga's death and him collapsing and the bloody trail from his hand pointing out towards the future, the way his hand is, with this song under it. Yeah, that's enough to make it number 2.
Yeah, I mean, it's something where the last line of the whole song is a phrase that I think is just very interesting in Japanese, which is "ima o ikite yuku," which is like ikite yuku means like to go forward, or like to live and go forward, right? So that yuku is to go, and that ikite is to live. So they're combining those two verbs. And then ima is now, but using wo there, which is basically a grammatical particle that identifies like direct objects, is like. It's not we're going to like live to the moment or something. It's like we're going to live like through this moment and move through this moment. It's like it's not even just like live now. We're going to live through now. And it's just a very interesting grammatical construction that I think captures the psychology of the orphans, and that like that the present is the only thing that they're afforded by the world. And that and that's like part of what this flower of hope is. That they're trying to pass down through this constant moving present that is just moving forward moment by moment. Like it's just, as you say, the lyrics of the song in Japanese are so beautiful. That yeah, it's if you have to, I think, like listen to the song with the lyrics, kind of like Asue. There's so much going on there that using a translation or something to help unravel some of that is very, very powerful.
I'm gonna be perfectly honest. Frisia is probably the reason that I pushed Iron Blood Orphans as fucking hard as I did on our rankings, like that song and my memories of its amazing ending wrapped up in it. Just, it's perfect.
It is a perfect song. But there are many perfect Gundam songs, because another perfect Gundam song is my number 1. It was on your list. I think maybe a little bit too low on your list, because my number 1 is Nibun no Ichi, the original opening theme to Gundam Build Fighters by Back On. Of all the Gundam songs, other than the like main instrumental theme to G Gundam and like Just Communication from Gundam Wing, or the English version of it, this is the Gundam song that has been in my life, I think, the longest, because I watched Build Fighters as a sports anime before I watched it as a Gundam anime, and this has always been in my absolute top tier opening themes in anime. I think if you are looking for a good shonen anime theme, you really can't get any better than Nibun no Ichi. I mean, any song that you're watching your shonen anime, and this is about like playing sports and being with your friends and having a good time and overcoming obstacles and hardships together with your friends and with bonds of togetherness and all that kind of shit. And like you get the song for that show, and it starts immediately with the singer just belting out the words "Hitori janai," which just means like you're not alone. Because just that opening bit that comes in with like very minimal instrumentation, Hitori janai boku ra tsunagatte iru kara, ashite to fumidashitaku nattanda, sorezore no yume no iro o tsunaide, kono sora ni azayaka na niji o kakeo. That fucking line is so good, because what it is saying, the basic translation is like, you're not alone because we are connected together. So let's like step forward into tomorrow together, and take the colors of all of our dreams and weave them together into a rainbow bridge and cross the sky. Like, it is the most like intensely like optimistic, bright, hopeful, cheerful. We like everyone's friends, and with the power of hope and friendship, we can like succeed the world. Like that metaphor, I just adore so much. Of let's take the color of our different dreams and weave them together into a rainbow bridge to cross the sky. Like, what an incredible fucking metaphor that is. It is the most saccharine horseshit you've ever heard in your life, but sometimes you need super saccharine horseshit. It is, sometimes, I just need something to be happy and hopeful and good. And that's like what Gundam Build Fighters is as an anime. And this song to me, like, it crystallizes that into musical form, into like, if you're watching the show, it's just like 90 seconds of music, and you have the sick J-rock singer, and then you have like your awesome rap breakdowns, and it's just, the whole thing has this incredible energy to it that just pushes you through, and it gives you that hope and that energy to think that, like, when I have darkness in my own life, I'm not alone, because we are together, and there are other people in this too. And it's like, like the second time they come to the chorus, it says "Hitori janai te omoita toki kara." Like, ever since I started thinking or believing that I wasn't alone, like my dreams could become I felt like my dreams could become real. This unchanging smile that I now have on my face is there because we have built it together. Like, what just like incredibly beautiful lyrics these are, describing the power of friendship and relations and connections in the world, which is at its core just what shonen anime is all about. And so it is one where I think it is maybe easy to dismiss it a little bit as like an incredibly cheesy song, because it is so cheesy. It is cheesy as fuck, but it reminds me of the Japanese songs on Digimon Adventure. If people have only watched the like absolutely fucking butchered American versions of Digimon Adventure that have like the terrible early 2000s techno rap bullshit that they did to replace that music, like if you thought that fucking the American soundtracks for Dragon Ball ruined the music for an anime series, you have heard nothing of what they fucking did with Digimon. But the original Digimon Adventure has these two songs by Koji Wada, I think the singer was, Butterfly, which is the opening theme, and Brave Heart, which is the theme that plays whenever the Digimon like digivolve, and it's like the big epic fight scene that we're going to save the day because we have evolved and become more powerful. And both those songs also have this exact same energy of Nibu no Ichi, of like, it's cheesy, like it's so, again, saccharine, it's super sweet, it's super hopeful, almost to excess, but it also, I think, has this like unwavering earnestness and optimism that says like, hey, like we can get through this together. And it just feels like the song is there giving you a hug, like that's the feeling you get. That's like the song is saying you're not alone because this song is here with you, and these people are here with you, and the show is here with you, and the world can be with you in certain ways. And any song that can feel hopeful in the bullshit that is the world we live in, that's going to get me the number one spot on my season 3 songs list.
That's pretty fucking great. I love that song too. I love hearing you talk about it. It is indeed just a warm fucking, not a warm hug of a song, a tight, brutal like hug of a song, yes, that wants you to love yourself as much as it loves you. It's exactly beautiful. But I have to say,
nothing has ever believed in me as much as Nibu no Ichi. Like, that's the feeling. It's just like, it's like, whatever you got, man, I'm with you. It's like, that's like what that song is.
Great song. I picked a different song for my number one. My number one, and honestly, I have to say, this was the only easy decision anywhere on these fucking lists today for me, was I had known for a good long while that this was my number one for year 3, and that is Gino Senko, Flash of G, from Gino Reconquista. For everything you said, Sean, it is just the most joyous fucking song. I love Daisuke Hasegawa's lyrics, but I also have to say, this is one where the placement is definitely influenced a little bit by the Hiroko Moriguchi cover from Gundam Song Covers 3, which is done with this incredible guitar backing, but also just her lyrics and having a different lyricist, let alone a lyricist as talented as Hiroko Moriguchi, sing it, giving you a different flavor on the lyrics. Just, I think, hammered home for me the playfulness of these lyrics is, I think they're maybe the best lyrics that Tomino has ever written for a song, because this is one of his Rin Iogi tracks, right? Mm-hmm. And just the sheer playfulness of it, the way it just embodies the spirit of this show I love so much, and just that I love listening to this song. It makes my day every time I hear it in either of the versions, the original Daisuke Hasegawa or the Hiroko Moriguchi cover. It just is my number one. It's one of my, you'll see it's very high in my top 40. I think this is one of the definitive Gundam songs for me. And I think you could do a bunch of other versions with it, I could see a much like simpler, almost folk guitar redoing of this song that would be very fun. It's just a stone cold classic. I love it to death. It's my number one.
Yeah, I mean, it's my number 2. So
right,
like,
we're
I
very
definitely
close.
agree with you. Yeah, that like it was one that, yeah, I mean, I had it pegged. My top 3 were ones I had pegged very early on. Because again, all of these are songs I've loved and listened to for years and years and years, for well past before we did this. So it's like I knew that. But yes, Gino Senko is an all-time great. Yeah, it is my number 2, and it also features quite highly on my top 40 list also.
Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of our top 40 lists, do you want to go ahead and share those?
Yeah, let's lay out the pathway of brutal murder we've laid through the songs of Gundam history. Here's the 40 that survived.
Yes.
And here are the 100 that didn't.
And I want to say, In past years, I had cheated, and it pissed off Sean. I just wrapped all the Daisuke Inoue songs in a bow and put them in one spot. I unwrapped them. There is no cheating on this list, with a minor asterisk, but it's not related to bundling songs together. We'll talk about that later. It was hard. Here's the thing. I'm very happy with the 40 themselves. And I'm very happy with them in part because I finished my top 40 and made a playlist for myself with them all. And then the other day I drove back from Colorado to Iowa, and I had 13 hours in the car, and some of those hours, about 3 of those hours, I spent listening to my top 40. And that gave me, and then I tacked on a couple other songs at the end that I was also considering, and that made it very clear for me. I cut a couple, and I added a couple, and I massaged it a little bit, and then I played with the rankings, and I wound up very happy with it. I could move the rankings around, like my top 5, 6, my top 10 I'm very confident in. Other ones, I think the tiers are right. I could play with the rankings, but overall, the 40 themselves, I feel good because I spent enough time sitting with this that I feel good with the 40. That said, there were a lot of just horrifically brutal cuts, and at a certain point, I got good at killing my darlings.
Yeah, I mean, I feel good about my 40 also, but like I would say probably the bottom 5 was like 36 to 40. I fought over brutally. Just like it was that thing of where I think once you get to about that spot, there are a lot of songs that I feel very similar in quality. And it's like, and when I look at like, with my head, I consider the Graveyard, which is like, there's about 20 songs below that to me is the Graveyard. That's like, oh my God, there's so many amazing songs in here. But yes, I feel very good about my 40. I feel like they're very representative of my taste in Gundam. I feel pretty good about most of the individual placements. I did I did go back and revise a lot of the placements from my old list, which I think I did almost none of for the second year because I was like, fuck that, I'm just going to not think about it. But obviously for this, I described this on a text to you, Jonathan, of I had a moment of panic a couple of days ago where I realized there was like a batch of songs that from the first year material that I had forgotten to copy over into my 3rd year anniversary document that were songs that hadn't made the top 20 then, but I realized, oh, but there are songs on there that might make the overall top 40, and then I think a couple of them did. But it was like this moment of, oh shit, oh fuck, now I have like 10 other songs that I didn't even think about that now I have to put in there also. So this was brutal. This was absolutely brutal. I never want to have to go through it again. I mean, I love my list and I love this music, but I love it all, and I don't want to be mean to the ones that didn't make it and said you didn't make it.
Yeah. Very hard, but we get to share a bunch of great Gundam songs here. So let's go back and forth and briefly, we're not going to do monologues on any of these, right? But maybe if you have a brief comment to add about it, we can. And then we can talk about some overall findings at the end. But yeah, these are both of our official top 40 Gundam songs. Deep breath, Sean.
Yep.
My number 40. Kawakunai, Kawakuanai, Not Afraid of Anything Anymore, I'm Not Scared. The Chiaki Ishikawa song from Mobile Suit Gundam 00, the movie Awakening of the Trailblazer, which just plays over a really stunning moment in that film and is a hauntingly beautiful song.
That did not quite make my list. My number 40 is River by Tatsuya Ishii, the second ending theme to Gundam Seed that is only in the original airing of Gundam Seed. But this is one of those, like, I play a guitar, and this is a fucking great acoustic guitar song. And if you like playing guitar, oh my god, the fucking acoustic guitar of the song kicks so much ass.
River finished outside my top 40, but I just want to say the 3 Gundam Seed endings in the original version of Gundam Seed are fucking perfect. Just an amazing run of endings. The other 2 are on my list. My number 39 is 10 Years After by Chihiro Yonakura from the 08MS team. A song I love so much that I used it as the theme song for our 10th anniversary podcast last week and the special intro to that one. What a cool song.
It's a great song. It is also on my list. My number 39 is Magic by Jacob Wheeler, the ending to Stardust Memory. One of a couple of the very soulful English language Gundam songs throughout history. This is one that I was very happy to find a spot for it on my list because it's a song I love a lot, and it obviously didn't end up making my list last time, and always felt like, God, but I like this song so much. I'm glad we expanded it to 40 so I could get it on there.
Funnily enough, it's one of the darlings I killed.
Wow. It was in your top 20 last year.
I know it was. It fell out in part because Human Touch rose even higher this time. And I just went, you know what, Human Touch, you do Magic one better anyway. Magic can die so other songs can live. Like my number 38, Tracer, which we already talked about, the Hiroyuki Sawano song with Benjamin from Hathaway.
My number 38 is I Trust You Forever. Trust You Forever, the Yoshifumi Ushima song, the second opening to Mobile Fighter G Gundam. I'll say one of the brutal cuts was Flying in the Sky is not on my list. That hurt, but I like Trust You Forever more. So that's where you get with Mobile Fighter G Gundam. It's like only one can survive, and it's sometimes I like the B side more than the A side. And that's one of those cases.
Well, I was actually okay leaving Trust You Forever off because I knew you would have it, and so I put Flying in the Sky at number 37 by Yoshifumi Ushima.
That's fucking crazy.
I know.
How did that work out?
G Gundam opening 1. I love Flying in the Sky. You love Trust Me. Well, we both love both of them. I think I slightly prefer Flying in the Sky. You slightly prefer Trust Me Forever. Together, they're a perfect side A, side B. They're great. It's my 37.
And we clearly like them at almost exactly equal amounts relative to the other Gundam songs, which is an incredibly weird coincidence. My number 37, I was very glad that I could put this on a list because it was my number 11 for our season 3, is Razor Flag by Man with a Mission, the original opening theme to Iron-Blooded Orphans. And is my number 11. I think it is the only song that got cut from my other top 10 that didn't make it here. So it did make it here. So it is my number 11 for that list, and it gets to be actually recognized because this is a fucking great opening, and it was brutal not having it on that season 3 list.
Yes, absolutely. My number 36 is Magic Time by, we didn't say the artist name before, Sudana Yuzu Yuli. Because it's a trio, so they just put their names together. Re-Rise ending number 1. It's Magic Time. It's great.
It's very funny. So you have one of the Spice Girls ass Gundam songs as your 36. My 36 is the other Spice Girls ass Gundam song, which is Trust You by Yuna Ito, which is the 4th ending theme to 00 Gundam. This is just a song that every time it gets to that big chorus of I trust you, I need you, like all that, it's like, man, it just gets you. And so you have the very like cool Spice Girls song, and I have the very like ballad nice Spice Girls song at number 36.
Absolutely. Another classic ending for me at 35, Believe in the Starry Sky by Mami Ayakawa from Zeta. I can't help believing you. It's great.
Yep. Great song. It will also be on my list. My number 35 is 10 Years After by Chihiro Yonekura, the OHMS team ending.
There you go. My number 34 is Asue by Galileo Galilei, the guy who totally discovered gravity.
Yes, the Gravity Man. My number 34 is Eternal Wind, Hohoemi wa Hikaru Kaze no Naka by Hiroko Moriguchi, the theme to Mobile Suit Gundam F91.
Just a tiny bit higher on mine. My number 33 is The Era is Crying by Masato Arai, the Double Zeta first ending. My favorite song from Double Zeta. The saxophone on this song kicks so much ass. Love the lyrics, love all of it. This is one of my pet projects, is always putting this on a list, because I feel like I must be the biggest fan in the world of this song.
This was like both of the Double Zeta endings were so close to getting on mine. They were in that like 40 to 36 because I love them both. And it was that moment of panic I had was those two songs are a big part of it because they were cut in my original top 20. And I'm like, oh God, does Jidai Naiteru, does it actually finally get a place on my list? And it didn't quite make it. And I'm glad it's on yours because I love that ending also. Okay, so we're at 33 for me. My 33 is Hatena by Penguin Research, the second opening theme to Build Divers Re-Rise.
My number 32 is me just completely demolishing the rules of this list and skipping ahead. This is Ubugoe by Hiroko Moriguchi. This is the new song on Kukuru's Doan's Island. I know we haven't reviewed it yet, but fuck it, we were doing our top 40. This song made me cry watching the movie. I just had to. I'm sorry. I know it's kind of a cheat because it's not in years 1, 2, 3, but I don't know when we're going to do a big Gundam song ranking again. So I put it here, and frankly, this might rise into like top 10 territory at a certain point. I love this song. We'll talk about that more when we get to that movie.
I haven't actually seen that movie yet. I have not had the time to sit down and watch it, so I haven't even heard that song.
Well, then let me give a quick update to the listeners. I have a copy of the Blu-ray coming in from Japan, and when I have it in hand, and it is perfectly legal for us to review it, we will be reviewing it.
Yes. And
there you go.
You have cheated once again, Jonathan. You have cheated once again on your list.
I apologize.
Nothing sacred to you is nothing sacred. My number 32 is not an anime. It is Anime Janai by Masahito Arai. It's not an anime because it's a song. It is the original opening theme to Mobile Suit Double Zeta Gundam.
Really amazing. Double Zeta, you cannot call it an anime. The first half. You can call the second half an anime because there's no command that it's not. But the first half, not an anime.
It's not an anime. It's a real thing, bro.
Number 31, Divers High by Sky High from Gundam Build Divers.
That's a really fun sentence. Divers High by Sky High and Gundam Build Divers. My number 31 is Orphans no Namida by Mishiya, the original ending theme to Iron Blooded Orphans.
My number 30 is Raise Your Flag by Man with a Mission, the original opening to Iron Blooded Orphans.
My number 30 is Meteor by TM Revolution, the Gundam Seed insert song that plays when the Freedom Gundam is introduced and comes in and saves the day. Just top tier Gundam insert song, also sung by, you can either say it's sung by TM Revolution or Arataki Ito from Genshin Impact. Either really works.
Oh, it's so good. I Meteor, not on my top 40. I was pretty sure you would have it in there, which made it a little easier to leave it off. It is great. My number 29, Amuro Furimukanai. It's Forever Amuro by Koh Ikeda, the original Gundam to Mobile Suit, or the original ending to Mobile Suit Gundam, a song that you cannot think about without singing the beginning of the song, right?
Yes, it is it's very close to where it is on my list. My number 29, though, is Broken Mirror by Boom Boom Satellites, which is the fifth ending theme to Unicorn Gundam. I've always really loved how fucking hard this song goes. And I've always also loved Boom Boom Satellites as a band name is great.
It's good. Not on mine, but I do love it. Number 28 is Dreams by Romantic Mode from After War Gundam X, the first opening. Maybe the Gundam opening that goes the hardest in its first, opening chords. God, this song kicks so much ass. I love it.
Yeah, I like the After War Gundam X openings, but neither of them managed to quite break onto my list. But my 28 is Amuro Furimukanai. Yeah, Amuro Forever, A.N. Niyamato by Koh Ikeda. You can't have a top 40 Gundam songs list and not have Amuro Forever on there. It would be a crime.
I am still half convinced they chose the name Amuro because it's such a good name to croon.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Number 27 is Zeta Transcending Time by Mami Ayakawa, the first Mobile Suit Zeta Gundam opening and a Stone Cold classic that you cannot hear in the US due to rights issues, so you gotta pirate that shit.
Yeah, exactly. My number 27 is Carry On by Back On, the insert song from GM's Counterattack.
My number 26, now we are getting into the so good they're almost impossible to parse and rank for me.
Yes.
My number 26 is Aura by Shinji Tanimura, the first ending to Turn A Gundam. Yeah, I mean, Aura is just one of those, it kind of leaves you speechless every time you hear it. It's a beautiful song that bowls you over, and it's kind of impossible to pin down like the show itself.
Great ending. It might pop up on my list also. My number 26 is Mobius by Hiroyuki Sawano, MPI, Lako, and Benjamin, the opening theme for Mobile Suit Gundam Hathaway's Flash.
Just a touch higher on mine. My number 25 is Friends by Stephanie, the second ending to Mobile Suit Gundam 00. I've always loved Friends. It's a song that it's just pure fucking J-pop, and it goes so big, and I think it is so infectious, and it is with the most we know what we're doing ending animation ever.
Yes.
Of all the boys cutting each other's hairs on the beach. Man, if you need any clear evidence that 00 ran where Gundam Wing walked and stumbled, it is this ending. It gets what the fucking appeal of this thing is. It's so perfect.
Yeah, that ending's not quite on my list, but it is fucking great. And I always have to shout out how great a band named Stephanie is.
Yes.
For a band that does not have anyone named Stephanie on it. It's just Stephanie.
It's like if you and I started a band and called it Jeff.
Exactly, yes. It's
yeah.
Hi, we're Jeff. Okay, my number 25 is Daybreak's Bell by Larkin Seal, the original opening theme to Mobile Suit Gundam 00.
I don't have to be coy. You all know that one's higher on mine. Number 24, The Winner by Miki Matsubara from 0083 Stardust Memory.
This is a fun pairing. My number 24 is Back to Paradise by Miki Matsubara, the insert song in 0083.
I think we must be somewhat like new type sensitive, Sean, that we keep coming up with these fucking things. It's crazy. My number 23 is Find the Way by Mika Nasashima from Gundam Seed. It's the third ending. This is one that I had kind of forgotten about until I was building Gunpla a couple weeks ago, and I listened to all the Seed openings and endings, realizing, God, it's such a great set of songs. Yeah. And I hit Find the Way, and this like wave of memories came over me about the ending of Gundam Seed, and I just adore this song. It's such a gorgeous song. It's got such a good build to it. I think it encompasses lyrically what I love about the final act of Gundam Seed, in that it is about these characters literally finding the way through chaos and violence and bloodshed to how do we wring a better future out of this thing. And because Gundam Seed, the best thing Gundam Seed gave Gundam was the thing where you start playing the theme song right before the end credits start, right? And Find the Way has some of the best uses of that because those final episodes are so powerful. I adore this song.
Interesting. Yeah, that's not on my list, but it is a great song. I'm happy to get more Seed representation out there.
You're going to be happy with my next few picks.
My number 23 is Sora no Kanata De by Hiroko Moriguchi, the fourth ending theme to Mobile Suit Gundam The Origin.
My number 22 is the Gundam Seed song everyone knows and loves, Although We Were Always Together by Seesaw, one of the like iconic anime endings ever, and I don't know what I have to add to that other than, yeah, for a reason. It's good.
It might be more than a little bit higher up on my list, but yes, Annani Shiratanani, great song. My number 22, also a great ending theme, is Wanna, or Trap, by the Backhorn, the original ending theme to Mobile Suit Gundam 00, the most punk-ass punk song in any Gundam thing ever. This song kicks so much ass.
Love that song. Not on my top 40, but it's fantastic. My number 21, finishing my trio of Gundam Seed songs, is Wheels of Dawn by Fiction Junction Yuka, which plays over one of the best scenes in Gundam Seed and one of the best scenes in Gundam, which is the escape from the Orb Union and the explosion, but also is just that song, the build of that song, the way it gets bigger and bigger. Great. Also a song where I think my estimation of it rises because of a great Hiroko Moriguchi cover. Just a phenomenal song.
Yes, and that is a very good cover. That will also be higher up on my list. My number 21 is Asue by Gravity Man himself, Galileo Galilei, the original opening theme from Mobile Suit Gundam Age.
There's someone listening to this who doesn't understand sarcasm, who is going to go to an astronomy class and get something very wrong.
Yes, it's like the church excommunicated Galileo Galilei because they're like, you invented gravity, and before everything was just floating randomly in space, and you heathen, how could you try to take God's place and invent a basic force like gravity?
My number 20 is Soldiers of Sorrow by Daisuke Inoue, the insert song from Mobile Suit Gundam 2, Soldiers of Sorrow.
Very interesting. My number 20 is Hasen no Namida by Masayoshi Yamazaki, the the ending to the 6th episode of Mobile Suit Gundam The Origin.
Yes, very good. My number 19 is the only Gundam song I've ever sang drunk at karaoke in Japan with a stranger, Stand Up to the Victory by Tomohisa Kawasoe. It's just the most tonally out-of-step opening with an anime ever, and I love it.
Stand Up to the Victory is one of the ones that is actually not on my list. It was a very hard cut.
Oh, fuck you. No, I'm kidding.
This is one where I actually think that in some ways the Gundam Song Covers 3 version of it, I like quite a bit more, to the point where it makes putting the original one almost hard on the list, because I think it's a pretty straightforward improvement on the song. Yeah, that arrangement.
No, but man, I will just never not be amused by the image of Uso Ewin running in front of a starry, constellation version of Shakti with his arms out as the singer croons "Stand Up to the Victory," and then I'm thinking of the actual show where he just sees death after death after death, culminating in his holding his mother's head in a fucking helmet. I love it. I love that this was what Tomino came up with. Mad fucking genius.
Yeah, someone needs to put over, just take that scene from the midpoint of Victory Gundam where he's holding his mother's decapitated head in the helmet saying, "This is my mother," and just put Stand Up to the Victory over that scene. And just see how fucking insane that would feel. Alright, so back to the list. My number 19 is Beginning by Daisuke Inoue from the 3rd Mobile Suit Gundam movie. It's the insert song.
Little higher for me. My number 18 is Vigilante by Sawano Hiroyuki, featuring MPI and Gemie from Mobile Suit Gundam Narrative. I've always loved this song. I listen to it all the time, but I did actually recently re-watch Narrative, and I was I forgot how well it is used in that movie, because it's used several times with several different arrangements that all just kick ass. And man, some of the best stuff in that movie is when it is just going, and Sawano Hiroyuki is under that, just doing his thing. It's so good.
Yeah, this is not quite on my list, but I'm glad it's on yours, because it is like I'm not a huge fan of narrative, but all the music in narrative is fantastic. My number 18 is "Oh, I Can't Help Believing You." It's Hoshizoto no Believe by Mami Ayukawa, based on the Neil Sedaka's song "Bad and Beautiful" from Mobile Suit Zeta Gundam. It's the one and only ending theme to Zeta Gundam.
Yep.
That again, you gotta pirate that shit if you're over here, because it's a great song, and I can't imagine watching Zeta Gundam without having that ending theme. It would be blasphemous.
It would be blasphemous, and that is a song that just feels more and more ironic the deeper you get into Zeta, the closer you get to the absolutely brutal ending. My number 17 is another Sawano Hiroyuki original, this time featuring Aimee, and that is Rin Iogi, the ending song to Unicorn Gundam Episode 6. Please hear me. This song is amazing. We've spent, I'm sure, like a solid hour talking about this song over the years. It's a masterpiece.
Yeah, that's also an example of a song that, like, when the Gundam Song Covers version came out, it's not a huge... It does change, but it's not a hugely different version of that song. That's another one where it just feels like you gotta kind of, like, really go with what that song does, because it's so good. And it is on my list. It's a little bit higher up. My number 17 is Aura by Shinji Tanimura, the original ending theme to Turn A Gundam called Turn A Gundam.
My number 16 is Nibun no Ich by Back On, Build Fighters Opening 1.
Very good song. It's a little higher on my list. My number 16 is Zeta Tokyo Koite, or Cross the Time by Mami Ayukawa, based on the Neil Sedaka song Better Days Are Coming, the original opening theme to Mobile Suit Zeta Gundam.
My number 15 is Don't Say Goodbye, sung by Kaori Sawada for Mobile Suit Gundam The Origin Episode 5.
Very good. My number 15 is Akatsuki no Kuruma, or The Wheels of Dawn by Fiction Junction Yuka, the insert song from Mobile Suit Gundam Seed.
My number 14 is Turn A Turn by Hideaki Saijo from Turn A Gundam. Just the craziest Gundam opening, and I love it. Also, Jesus Christ, a good Hiroko Moriguchi cover.
Yes, that is a primo one. All like the Japanese instruments they put in that. Oh my god, that's very good. My number 14 is Re-I-Am by Aimee, the ending theme to episode 6 of Mobile Suit Gundam Unicorn.
My number 13 is Meguriai Encounters by Daisuke Inoue from Mobile Suit Gundam 3, Encounters in Space. It's a classic.
It is a classic. My number 13 is The Human Touch by Warren Wiebe, the original ending theme to Afterwar Gundam X.
A little higher for me. My number 12, a song that holds a special place in my heart. I love it. It's Cage by Sawano Hiroyuki NZK featuring TL. It is the insert song in Narrative Gundam that is the reason I like Narrative Gundam more than most people, because that song makes the fucking movie, and it's beautiful and breaks my heart, and I love it.
And you've got a lot of Hiroyuki Sawano on your list.
But we're not done.
Yes, no, yeah. My number 12 is Phrygia by Yudu, the fourth ending theme to Mobile Suit Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans.
My number 11 is Mobius by Sawano Hiroyuki NZK featuring MPI Lako and Benjamin. You know I love this song.
It's a great song. My number 11 is Ash Like Snow by The Brilliant Green, the second opening theme to Mobile Suit Gundam 00. The power chords go so hard in the song, they go so hard in this song.
I don't love that song the way you do, so it's not on my top 40, but it is great, and I'm glad it's this high for you. Into our top 10, Sean.
Yes.
My number 10 is Phrygia by Uru, Iron-Blooded Orphans Ending 4, and the song that makes me cry.
My number 10, the most impossible song to rank on this list, is Tobe Gundam by Koh Ikeda, the original opening theme of Gundam, the Mobile Suit Gundam. I don't know how you rank this, but I knew it had to at least be in my top 10, and so there it is.
More on that in a second. My number 9 is Daybreak's Bell by Larkin Seal, the first opening to Gundam 00, a song that, to this day, I think I like more every single time I hear it.
It's very fucking good. My number 9 is the G of Genki. It's the G of Hajimari. It's the G of Reconquista. It's G no Senko by Hasegawa Daisuke, the ending theme to G Reco.
My number 8 is Human Touch by Warren Wiebe, the ending to Afterwar Gundam X. And every time I hear this song, it's like being hit by a fucking freight train. It is such a miracle of a power ballad. It doesn't get better than that.
Yeah, it's fucking amazing. It's my number 13, so yeah, it is very high up for a reason. My number 8 is Turn A Turn, Turn A Turn, Turn A. It is Turn A Turn by Hideki Saijo, the original opening theme to Turn A Gundam.
My number 7 is Tobe Gundam by Koh Ikeda, the original Mobile Suit Gundam opening that you just mentioned. And I just want to pause a moment on how hard this was to rank.
You're right.
Sean, I made my top 20 and I forgot about it. And then it was, wait, where does it go? And it's even harder, I think, for me because I edit all this stuff.
Right.
Which means Tobe Gundam is the theme song to the podcast. It's the theme, and we now use a cover by the Japanese Maritime band. But if you edit things, you hear them a lot. I have heard Tobe Gundam probably 1,000 times, like just so many fucking times, editing to music or editing the music to visuals and all sorts of different things, on top of how many ways it is used in the franchise. It's not a song I can tell you I like, dislike anything of that. It's like fucking air to me. It's like, how do I rank oxygen versus pizza or something, right? Like, well, I need oxygen to survive, but I really like pizza. Fly Gundam, it's just part of me. I guess number 7 is where I put it. I love it. It's a perfect opening. It's amazing. I fell in love with Gundam before we met any of the characters because I fell in love with Gundam seeing this song as the opening.
Yes, I mean, I echo everything you say, even without like it being the thing I edit. It's just like, it's a thing you hear if you watch like an interview with actors from Gundam.
Yes.
They play parts of the theme. It's like anything that, like, any ancillary media you consume, any of the games, anything is going to have this song in it in some way, shape, or form. And yeah, it's just, as you say, it's like, it's not a do you like it or not like it. It's like, this is just the fact of like nature. It is, to go back to our stupid Galilei running joke, it is like gravity. It's
Yes.
like, do you like it that when you drop a ball, it hits the ground? Like, I don't know. That's just what things do because that's how existence is. Like,
Yes.
I don't fucking know. So yeah, it's one of those where it's like, it has to be very, very high. I think it's like, it kind of has to be at least at the top 10. I'm glad it's there for both of us. But yeah, it's an absurd thing to try to rank to other songs for a lot of reasons.
It's a song we like so much that every episode of this fucking podcast opens with you yelling, Moeadere, Gundam! Yeah.
All right, back to our list. Number 7, You're Not Alone. It's Nibu no Ichi by Back On, the original opening theme to Gundam Build Fighters.
My number 6 is From the Aqueous Star with Love by Hiroko Moriguchi, the queen of Gundam songs, the second opening to Zeta, and the best Gundam opening. It's the highest Gundam opening on my list.
I will agree with you with that second part. Maybe it's a little bit higher up on my list, but it's definitely the best Gundam opening. My number 6 is Ai no Senshi, or The Soldiers of Sorrow, by Daisuke Inoue from Mobile Suit Gundam 2, also known as Mobile Suit Gundam 2, The Soldiers of Sorrow.
Great song. My number 5 is Eternal Wind, Shining Smiles in the Wind by Hiroko Moriguchi, the ending to F91, a song that sometimes I ask myself, do I love the song this much, or do I just love this, that it's in one of the best scenes in all of Gundam? And then I go listen to the song and I go, no, I do love the song this much. It's my favorite Hiroko Moriguchi song for Gundam, and it's just one of my favorite songs. It's my number 5.
I can't agree with it, but I respect it. My number 5 is Annani Shodatta no ni, or Although We Were Always Together by Seesaw, the original ending to Gundam Seed. The ending that made it cool as shit to play the beginning of your song a little bit before the ending cuts in. It's also just like phonetically one of my favorite sentences in Japanese is Annani shodatta no ni. It's like the most, it's like, you know, Alfred Lord Tennyson has like cellar door is one of the most beautiful phonetic expressions in the English language. Not for what it means, but for how it sounds. That's what Annani shodatta no ni is, but also the phrase like we were always together is also just like immediately so dramatic. Great song. Kajiura Yuki is an amazing composer, and this is one of my favorite songs of hers.
My number 4, the G of Genki, is the G of Beginning, is the G no Reconquista, is the G no Senko by Daisuke Hasegawa, the G Reco ending. This is how much I love it. It's my number 4.
Very good. My number 4 is Meguriai, or Encounters, by Daisuke Inoue from Mobile Suit Gundam 3, Encounters in Space.
My number 3 is Beginning by Daisuke Inoue from Mobile Suit Gundam 3, Encounters in Space.
My number 3 is Tsuki no Mayu, or The Moon, by Yoko Kanno, the insert song turned second ending theme for Turn A Gundam called Turn A Gundam.
My number 2 is Beyond the Time by TM Network from Char's Counterattack.
My number 2 is Mizuno Hoshie Ayo Komete, or From the Aqueous Star with Love by Hideko Moriguchi, based on Neil Sedaka's unreleased song For Us to Decide, from Mobile Suit Zeta Gundam. It's opening number 2, and it is the best opening theme in Gundam.
My number 1 is Moon's Cocoon by Aki Okui from Turn 8 Gundam. I've thought for a while, Moon's Cocoon is one of the most powerful pieces of music I've ever heard. Has it edged ahead of Beyond the Time for me? And I realized listening to them lately, it has. I think Moon's Cocoon is a piece of music so powerful, it feels like humans didn't write it. It came from an alien planet. And that is why it is my number 1. It is my favorite Gundam song.
Weird that Turn 8 Gundam isn't your favorite Sun Gundam soundtrack. My number 1, always and forever, Beyond the Time, Beyond the Mobius Universe by Team Network, the theme to Mobile Suit Gundam, Char's Counterattack. You can change your future beyond the time. You can change your happiness beyond the darkness. Till that day forgives us. Beyond the time.
That was a lot of fucking Gundam music, Sean.
That's a lot of Gundam music, and there's like 1,000 songs we cut.
Yep. 1,000 songs we cut. And we're not even done with the fucking lists. Oh my god.
Remember when this was going to have like mobile suits and shit in it too? We were dumb.
No, that was stupid. Do you want to tell the kids what we're doing in part 3 of this crazy series we're doing?
I don't even remember. What the fuck are we even doing in part 3? We're doing mobile suits? We're doing characters?
Okay. At minimum, we're doing characters and mobile suits. And then we will also do some party topics. So send in ideas. We're not going to do like full top 10s for all of them. I think we'll decide which ones are top 5s, which like Char clones might be a 5 or a 10. Gundam Boys is definitely a 10. But send in your silly ideas. I already have a whole assemblage of them. Some of them might even be I'm rewriting them into questions like Sean, like, what is your favorite this? We don't need to do a full list of. But we'll try to make it a party, and that will be the next episode of Weekly Suit Gundam and the finale to Season 3 of Weekly Suit Gundam.
Yeah, so as you said, Jonathan, like send in questions and, feel free to format however you like. Like, we might not end up doing it as a full top 10 list, but feel free if you want to suggest it as, it's like top 10 boots in Gundam. Like, what's the favorite boots that were featured in Gundam? If that's the thing you want us to talk about, we might talk about it. So any and everything, feel free to send it in. Obviously, we can't guarantee we're going to talk about absolutely everything. But we will try to get as much as we can, and have a good time and talk about mobile suits, talk about characters, and just shoot the shit about Gundam and this ridiculous journey we have been on Weekly Suit Gundam for the past 3 years.
君は生き延びることができるか